Welcome to Draft on Tap. My name is Aldo Gandia, and I just want to begin this show by saying Danny Shimon is not with us tonight because he is doing something far more important, even more important than what we're doing tonight, which I am just crazy wild about what we're going to be doing tonight. But Danny's doing something much more important. He is celebrating the 8th birthday of his son, Christian Shimon. So, Christian, if you're watching on the replay, happy birthday from all of us at the Barroom Network, from Neil, from everyone. I bet you even our guest is going to wish you a happy birthday. So I hope you guys are having a great time tonight. Let me bring in the co-host of the show, Neil Stopczynski. Are you super excited about what we got going on tonight?
I mean, I'm done, man. This is good stuff. We're getting closer and closer to the draft. I'm getting more and more excited. Let's rock and roll, brother. I love that new opening, by the way. That's pretty badass.
No, thank you. Thank you. Always fine tuning it and so forth. I caught two similar pictures side by side, and I go, okay, got to correct that. So, but without further ado, let's bring in our guest. It's Dane Brugler from The Athletic. He is their draft analyst, and I'm just so excited about having him on because, as I was telling him before we went live, the work that you do, Dane, is just unbelievable. I mean, this is what the Twitter account, The Athletics, wrote about your draft guide, which you call The Beast. The definitive NFL draft guide from Dane is longer than Moby Dick, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, The Fellowship of the Ring. All 262 words are available now with a subscription to The Athletic. Dane, congratulations on a great job, and I am in awe of the work that you do. Really, truly in awe.
Well, no, I appreciate the kind words, and it makes me very, very happy that the hard work comes through because it's a year-round process for me, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy doing it. It's fun to research these guys, study these guys. And then write about them. And so, I think if you're an NFL draft fan, I promise you will not be disappointed with the draft guide. At my heart, I'm an NFL draft fan. And so I create a guide that I would want to read, that I would pay money for. So it has everything covered from, how many games did he start as a freshman to his birth date to, all the pro day data is NFL verified. And then, of course, the analysis and just, what I think of the player. So I really do appreciate everybody checking it out.
You are so absolutely correct about that. I mean, the work that you have, I'm just going to scroll through this thing, The Beast. I love that name. And you have all of the information that is necessary. I mean, these are really true, great, fantastic scouting reports. Like you look at Trevor Lawrence here. Let me zoom in a little bit. You've got his background, what he did in high school, what his next door neighbor said about him. It's just unbelievable, the amount of work. And as Neil knows, because he has done professional scouting himself, all of that information is relevant. It's not just there to add more words to make it 262,000 words. It is relevant for people who love the game of assessing talent. It's really a tremendous a work of art. I'll put it that way.
I appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, all that, trust me, I do not try to make it wordy. That's not the goal. My goal is to paint a picture. If you know nothing about the player, my goal is, okay, you read my report on that player, and after you're done reading it, you can picture in your mind what that player looks like. What would take for him to succeed? What kind of scheme would he fit in? And the background stuff, that to me, that's my favorite part of this, is researching these guys. And, just to understand. I think to understand where they're going, where they're headed, you need to know where they came from. And no two stories are alike. No two journeys to get to the NFL doorstep are the same. And so it's fascinating to learn, okay, oh, this guy played 5 sports in high school, or, oh, he didn't play football till his senior year, or this corner was a wide receiver all through high school. Just all these different things are really fascinating, and I think help tell us not only the type of player they are, but what type of player they can be moving forward.
Neil, why don't you start a conversation with Dane, and then I'm going to interrupt a little later and get some of my questions in. But I love to hear guys who have scouted and know these players inside and out just have a conversation. So I'm just going to turn it over to the two of you guys.
Yeah, sure. Appreciate it, Aldo. So, Dane, I know I'm not like 100% familiar with your background, how you made it to where you are. I understand you were with CBS for a little bit. You were a draft scout. I think that's Matt Miller's thing, the draft scout, right?
No, the original draft scout. That was back in the day, and it was a great operation. Frank Cooney and Rob Rang and those guys. It's not really there anymore, but it was a great first place to start out, getting my feet wet in the draft community.
Gotcha. How'd you make your way to the Athletic?
When the Athletic started, they were looking for a draft person, and they called me and said, "Hey, this is, let's talk about this." And I liked the fit, I liked what they were doing, and this is what I always saw myself scouting for a team. It's what I always wanted to do. I never really saw myself going in on the media side, but the more I did, the more I kind of enjoyed it because I don't have to be on the road 220 days out of the year. I get to have, I still go on plenty of road trips, but it's not nearly as much as area scouts and things like that. So, I can be with my family and still put a ton of work in, but still eat dinner every night, with my kids and things like that. So that's important to me. The media side obviously it's a bit different, because we're not scouting for a specific scheme, a specific culture with an organization. It's more general. There's a lot we don't know. And I think that's important for all of us to admit, in terms of the character of these guys, the medicals. We're going based off what we hear, not necessarily what we know. And that leaves a gray area, which can make it tough at times. Because these guys are, these players, these prospects are human beings, and they're not all, they don't all love football, as much as, you want to think, or they're not all Boy Scouts, and, that's okay. But you need to kind of factor that in, and it's tough to do from the outside looking in. So I've been blessed where, a lot of scouts have taken me under their wing to give me that informal scouting education over the last 15 years, and I've been able to kind of grow it over years and really, I think, learn from mistakes, get better, and I love doing this. It's a passion, it's a labor of love, and so I'm just gonna keep working hard and keep doing this because I love it.
My man, you're definitely speaking my language right now. I could vibe with you on all of that right now. I'm telling you.
That's great.
But yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on the process a little bit, the beast, all 7 rounds, every single pick. How do you go about getting the information from, the information itself to your contacts, to gathering it and organizing it and everything else? Take us through basically 365 days in the life of Dane.
Yeah, it starts off in really right now, getting ready for next year, getting these little tidbits from scouts and from different people throughout the football world, talking to coaches, talking to teammates, talking to guys in this draft cycle about their teammates that'll be in next draft cycle, and just learning as much as I can, asking the right questions. And it's something that I think the biggest struggle that I have is, understanding when to turn the tape off. And knowing that, okay, after 5 tapes, okay, I got this guy. Because you can't, obviously in a perfect world, you're watching every tape from the last 2 years. It's just not possible. There's not enough time. And so that's what I struggle with the most is, just understanding, okay, I got this guy, let's move on to the next one. So because some guys, after 3 games, you feel like you know them. Other guys, it takes 10 games and you still don't feel like you have a great grasp of the type of player they are and, what kind of projection they're going to be at the NFL level. But for me, it starts in the summer, getting a foundation with the upcoming senior class, a lot of the notable underclassmen, throughout the season. Once the tape comes in, that I'm updating those reports. And for the most part, all the hay's in the barn by the time January hits, because that's when it really picks up. That's when I'm on the road going to all these all-star events, combine, which didn't happen this year, but hopefully back to normal next year in February, and then the pro days. And that's where like I said, all the hay's in the barn, all the information is there. Just got to turn it into these polished scouting reports and put it all together. Make sure I'm talking to the right people, getting the pro day information. That was big. I'm very, very proud of the guide this year, because all the pro day, without the combine, we still need all the measurements, all the testing data. And I do have all the NFL verified pro day information in the guide. So I think that's a very strong selling point, and I'm very proud about that part of it. So it's a year-round process, and it's a tough balancing act, with family, and my wife's pregnant with twins right now, our third and fourth. So yeah, it's craziness, but in order to do this the right way, it almost takes a full year. There's no such thing as an off season in the scouting world, as I'm sure you know.
No, absolutely, 100%. I mean, it's I know that there's a lot of guys around the league right now that have really frustrated significant others, and God bless their souls for dealing with what we do. Yep. 100%. Usually the month of May is a great time to be able to go ahead and take some time and be with the ones that you love. But right now we got 2 weeks left until that first pick is called. In terms of this draft, what tell us generally your thoughts on kind of what sticks out to you in terms of position groups or storylines. What really sticks out to you about this draft?
Got to start with the quarterbacks, right? This is a historic quarterback group. We're going to see quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3 for only the third time in NFL draft history. Hasn't happened since '99. So that in itself is, a strong storyline. But then you factor in, we could have quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4, which has never happened before. Good chance we could see 5 quarterbacks go in the top 10, which has never happened before. And, history tells us that, 2 of the 5 quarterbacks are not going to pan out and live up to expectations. One will probably, meet the high expectations, and the other 2 might be, solid starters. So it's just fascinating to look at these quarterbacks, and you talk to different people and you get very different opinions on the order of these guys. For the most part, Trevor Lawrence is the top guy, not for everybody, but for the most part. And then things get really interesting. I've been a big Zach Wilson guy since the fall. My first mock draft was around Thanksgiving, and I had Zach Wilson at number 2, and I took a lot of heat for it. But now it's becoming more and more accepted as that's what's going to happen. For better or for worse, the Jets looks like they're going to take Zach Wilson at number 2, which should be really interesting to track. I think the Jets are in a better situation with the coaching staff, with some of the additions they made on offense. But obviously they're not there yet, and they still need to surround Zach Wilson with more talent. But then what does San Francisco do at 3? We know they're taking a quarterback, but which one? Is it Mac Jones? Is it Justin Fields? Is it Trey Lance? I would not be surprised if any one of those 3 names is called by Roger Goodell there at number 3. And then what happens at number 4 with the Falcons? They have a really interesting decision to make. Do you take the quarterback now and have your long-term succession plan in place for when Matt Ryan is done, likely in 2 years? Or do you take, they're probably going to get some trade action. Do you get a boatload of picks so you can trade out of that spot and get, turn that pick into multiple high picks? Or are you taking the best non-quarterback? And in my opinion, that's Kyle Pitts. And envisioning what Kyle Pitts could do to that offense in Atlanta, it's going to be a lot of fun. So what happens at the top? We know quarterbacks are going, we know Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson are going 1, 2. And then which quarterback's going 3? And then what does Atlanta do at 4? To me, that's the most intriguing part of this draft, especially obviously at the top in round 1.
Hey, Dane, I know one other guy that was singing the praises of Zach Wilson before people, in the media were, it's this guy right here.
There you go. Yeah.
He was like touting it, and I'm like, okay. He had a couple of good names. And you guys, no, you don't understand. This guy just does tremendous things.
It does. Well, hey, Neil, let me ask you, how do you reconcile the competition? Obviously it wasn't, in an ideal world, he's facing top defenses week in, week out, but we don't have that on tape. And so we have to, I think you'd agree, we can still grade him and judge him based on the quality of throws. But how do you reconcile the lack of quality competition on the 2020 film for Zach Wilson?
I think, to me, I've always looked at the fact that, you can only help who you're playing, number one. And who he was playing against, he was operating at a high, like an absurdly high level of production against all those opponents, right?
Yep.
If you look at everything he's done over the course of this past year, and you really you look at some of the stuff he did during 2019 too, it carried over. I think a lot of it was we all just wanted to see him do it consistently, back to back, 2 straight years. But this year he took it to an even greater level to me, right? I mean, he well over 75% completion. It was 33-3 in touchdown interception ratio. It is just video game numbers almost. To me, it's a combination of the high level production, the placement of the ball, the relative strength of his arm, and just really being able to be a playmaker. And, I think a lot of times that. If you can find a guy that can just legitimately go out there and just like make plays regardless of who they're playing. He did against USC in 2019, and he did against every single team he played this year. And he plays in a high level competition. I mean, let's not pretend like Houston and Boise State were just chopped liver, right? Yeah. I mean, they could play some ball, especially that Houston defense has some dudes, right? Yeah. So, I think it's just you look at what he did from a consistency standpoint and a domination standpoint, game after game after game after game during that 2019 season. I think you put all that together and you come up with a potentially super special prospect. And I think that number 2 pick is warranted.
No, I agree. I think that for me, something that I really look for in a quarterback is the ability to make that great spontaneous decision. And that goes back to something that Bill Walsh always talked about. For him, that's what separated the good from the great. And with Zach Wilson, I think you see that consistently. He makes that great spontaneous decision because he loves to play off platform. And sometimes to a fault, he'll escape a clean pocket when he doesn't need to. But his accuracy on the move, it's uncanny. It's really, really impressive. And, he benefited from a strong offensive line. Yeah, no doubt. But, he is an easy player, I think, to get really excited about. And I think the Jets are pretty excited about him and what he could be in this league. Still, he's a young player, still 21 years old, still learning, still adjusting. But as a natural ball handler, as, a guy who sees the field pretty well, and he's just naturally accurate. I mean, he's the type of guy that would step into a bar, never playing darts before, and just, wipe the room because he's just naturally accurate. That's just how he is. Big fan of Zach Wilson. And it's going to be fascinating to watch his development with that new coaching staff there in New York.
Hey, Dane, one of the many cool things that you do over at The Athletic is you do a mock draft. All the picks in the entire draft. That must take hours. But I'd like to share, and I was debating with myself, should I share this? But I noticed that you shared it for a couple of other teams, so I took the liberty of putting screen capturing your Bears mock draft. Mm-hmm. So I'd love for you to talk about Kellen Mond, who you have going to the Bears with the 2nd round pick, number 52 overall. And I believe that you had Davis Mills on your board ranked ahead of him. Why Mond over Mills?
Well, I think in this scenario, I had Mills off the board, so he wasn't in consideration. I had him going to the Patriots earlier in the 2nd round. To be honest with you, I'm not a big Mond fan. That's going to be the pick that when it's made, I think he's probably going to go in the 2nd round, where I don't necessarily see it. I think that he's very inconsistent. I get the intrigue. He's 6'3", 211 pounds. He's got a really good arm. And I think you could watch one tape and see one thing, and then you watch another tape and you see a different player, and it's tough to know, which guy you're getting. And so, you watch the Florida tape from the 2020 season, and you see a guy who's making throws downfield, layering his throws. He's playing at a high level deep into the game, 4th quarter when it matters the most. But then you throw on the LSU tape, and it's a little bit of the opposite, where he's scattershot and it's all over the place. And some people will subscribe to the theory that if I've seen him do it once, I know he can do it, and I'll take my chances. And I get that totally. But we're talking about a 2nd round pick, and that's a big price to pay for a quarterback you hope turns some inconsistent play into consistent play. So I'm not a big Mon fan, but talking to people in the league, they say he's not getting out of round 2. So it's, you look at the Bears, who, the quarterback situation has been fluid this offseason. And if they're going to get better, throw a dart at a guy like Kellen Mond, who, again, has a lot of talent. It's just he needs to be consistent. And maybe with some new coaching, he can figure that out. But it's a little bit of a risk there in the second round.
I'd love to hear you and Neil talk about Tevin Jenkins, who you have going in the first round to the Bears.
Yeah, I think he's an easy guy to like because he plays mean. I mean, he plays like he wants to bury you on every single snap, and that's really fun. His power is unique. I don't know that he necessarily looks all that intimidating, but he plays intimidating. He plays like he's a bouncer and he just wants to bury guys into tomorrow. So 6'6", 317 pounds, really thick player, not super long, but he plays broad, he plays wide, and so I think that really helps him. There are times where wide speed will stress him a little bit. And he's naturally a right tackle, but he does have left tackle experience, does have guard experience. So I think there's something to like there. I think he's a smart player. He's a guy that understands set points, he understands landmarks, and so he's a plug and play right tackle, which I think is exactly what Chicago could be looking for in the first round.
Yeah, I think when I go back and I look at that film, I'm just kind of glancing at my notes right now. You said the exact thing that I love about this kid. He's just mean and he's nasty. Yeah. When he gets a hold of a defender, he looks to finish in every single play. And when it comes down to offensive linemen, my big thing is just big, mean, nasty, athletic dudes. Because I grew up in the era where it was, T formation and it was pound the ball down your throat. And I just love that kick your ass style of play, especially up front in the trenches. You win the trenches, you win the game, generally, in most cases. The thing that always sticks out to me, I always feel like, when you have a high draft pick, there should always be a defining play. And the defining play to me is when he took Joseph Osai into the sideline, took out a couple of trainers into the process, along with some water jugs. I hope they were okay after that. And he goes ahead and body slams another dude for no reason. I mean, that game was sort of like his defining game to me, if not just a defining play. That game to me was his defining game.
And usually when you say he blocks someone off the screen, it's usually just a little bit of an exaggeration, but not in this case.
He just took him straight off the field.
Oh yeah,
the screen took him off the field.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing that I was always concerned about with Tevin Jenkins was I got word that he's not a football guy. What have you heard anything along those lines?
Yeah, it's tough because you hear that, and I've heard some of the same things, and that's where we're at a disadvantage, because and I've talked to Tevin. It's hard to really know because you do hear those whispers, and it's hard to gauge how, because there's a lot of guys in the NFL that don't love football. They do it because it's a paycheck and you make good money, you make a good living doing it. And I don't necessarily need my guys to love football, but because when you watch Tevin Jenkins play, you see a guy that looks like he's enjoying it. It looks like he's not passive by any means by how he plays. So it's a tough thing for those of us on the outside when we're going by what we hear and not necessarily what we know. And that seems to be the case with, medicals and character stuff and personality stuff. And so it's tough with a guy like Tevin Jenkins, who I know there's a little bit of split opinion about, with just, is he a guy that truly loves football or not? So it's tough for us to know.
We've only got a few minutes with you, Dane, and I'd love for you to answer this question. Earlier today, I ran a poll on our Barroom Network Twitter account. I asked the question, let's suppose that the Bears are unable to trade up and acquire one of the 5 coveted quarterbacks expected to go in round 1. So who do you draft? Do you draft Greg Newsome? These are I made the supposition that Tevin Jenkins was off the board. So you draft cornerback Greg Newsome, offensive lineman Alex Leatherwood, or wide receiver Elijah Moore, or maybe you just trade down for more picks. The population that follows, the 12,000 people that follow Barroom Network, 46% of them said trade down for more picks. What do you think about what they said? And if you were playing general manager, what would you do?
I would definitely leave the phone lines open, and you hear what kind of offers you could get. And if you get the right offer, then I think moving back would be a great opportunity there. Because I think there's a good chance that the quality of player you're picking right there at 20, probably not a huge difference between the type of player you're picking at 34 or however far you're moving back. With that said, Greg Newsome to me is a top 20 talent in this draft. I think there's a lot of, he reminds me of Kyle Fuller in a lot of ways. And so, I think that'd be a natural fit in Chicago. 6 foot, 192 pounds. He's a route magnet. And so I think there's a lot to like about him. Really, the only dings with Greg Newsome, he's missed at least 3 games each of the last 3 years. So you have to be comfortable with just, is he a durable guy? Anything to worry about there. And then he had 25 passes defended the last 3 years, only 1 interception, 0 forced fumbles. So you want to see him create some of those turnovers. But everything else, the type of athlete that he is, at the FBI, the football intelligence, there's a lot of things going for Greg Newsome. Somewhere in, between picks like 17 and 26, I think a team's going to get a really good corner with Greg Newsome.
You got a final question for Dane before we release him?
Yeah, I always like to know about your guys'. I'm a big sleeper pick guy, right?
Yeah.
I have a bunch of guys like to pound the table for that. Not a whole lot of people really love. Start off with Zach Wilson, and now everybody loves Zach Wilson. I think he owes me a steak dinner. But who's a guy in the class that not really a whole lot of people are talking about that you think may go higher than people think will go? Who are you pounding the table for?
Like a better known name, Benjamin St-Juste from Minnesota, tall, long type. He's a really good athlete. Wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in the top 100 picks. He's a good name to know. And then a real sleeper that not a lot of people know about is Jacob Harris at a UCF, tight end, wide receiver, former soccer player who's still new to football, but 6'5", 220 pounds, and a legit 4.4 athlete. Just blew up his pro day. And I think he's one of the big sleepers, big time special teams player too. So I feel good about him playing special teams while we're developing him for a role on offense. So somewhere on day 3, once we get to day 3, I'm taking Jacob Harris and feeling pretty good about the type of player he could be for my squad.
Dane, I can't think of many more people who are more in demand right now than you because not only of your tremendous work, but boy, oh boy, you're a great interview. I expected to see you be the heir apparent to Mel Kiper someday on ESPN or NFL Network. You choose. And so thank you very much for giving us this time. And we are huge, huge fans of your work. Please tell our audience where they can find your work and where they can find you on social media.
I can't thank you enough for the kind words. I really do appreciate that. Best way is on Twitter at DP Brugler. Then all my content's at The Athletic. And so, like I said, if you like the NFL draft, I promise you will not be disappointed with what we're providing, starting with the draft guide. I think it's well worth the subscription. So hopefully you check it out. And, it's something, like I said, if you like the NFL draft, 0 chance you're disappointed by it.
Yeah, and one of the cool things about it is there'll be columns from some of the Chicago football writers commenting on your work, like Kevin Fishbane commented on your mock draft and so forth. I mean, it's just loaded with great information. A subscription to The Athletic is well worth it. Dane, thank you very much for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it, Dane.
All right. It is now you and me, amigo.
Let's do it, man.
But first, I want to play a commercial. But first, before we go, what'd you think about the interview with Dane?
Oh, that's phenomenal. He does great work on a yearly basis. There's never a time when I look at what he puts out there and I think like, I really think that's a shit take. Like he's very logical in his thought process. He points out the attributes that matter and the traits that matter, and I just think he does a phenomenal job. And I think anytime we can get him on the show, I think we're blessed, man. I think we're blessed. Good job getting him on.
Thank you very much. And I have such an appreciation for guys like you and Danny and guys like Dane. And I go back to my days as a kid, looking at the newsstands. Back then, nothing was digital. This was back in the horse and buggy days, right? And so looking for magazines, anything that would give me more information about the upcoming draft. And there was a guy in Chicago who was hired by Pro Football Weekly. His name was Joel Bushbaum. And this guy never left his house, but he was hired by Pro Football Weekly to write a 50-page draft guide. And it grew to over 200 pages. And this guy was considered the mastermind of draft guides. And then Mel Kiper obviously kind of took that mantle because of his good looks and his articulation skills and so forth. But in my mind, the godfather of draft guides is that guy right now. And I am not blowing smoke. I think Dane really is the heir apparent to be considered the next guy. And by the way, one of the guys that works here at the Barroom Network, Greg Gabriel, has written a pretty cool draft guide for many years too, after he left the Chicago Bears as the director of college scouting. So we've been blessed. And by the way, we've got new news on Greg Gabriel. He's going to be doing some shows preparing us for the draft, but I'll save that for after the show. Any final thoughts before we go to a commercial break and then we look at your top 10 inside linebackers?
Yeah, I was just about to say, we got to get Greg on the show more. You know, he's got a great voice on really the entire process of scouting and evaluation at the highest level. And so it would be great to have him on the show, or just in the network in general. We got to get him involved a hell of a lot more, I think.
Yeah, you know, and he has been so busy the last few months, which is why we kind of suspended his regular show. And it was like a blessing from the skies. He gives me a call and says, I'm ready. Let's do it. And so
Love it.
We'll be announcing his appearances coming up really, really soon. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. And then when we come back, it's Neil sharing his top 10 inside linebackers.
Can be a more dynamic scorer. One of the things that we've harped on this year is the lack of shot creation from him. We haven't seen it as consistently as we'd like to.
When you come from Finland and you go to college and you don't work on those things because you're just so much better than everybody, you're so used to being able to shoot your three whenever you want it, you can fall into a lull in your working on your craft because it's worked for you. What you've been doing has worked. So why should I change it? You know, and there's only so many guys like that come into the league that are like, man, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough yet. I need to work on this. I need to work on that. And there are guys that will come in the league and be like, you know what? I got here doing what I do. Why am I going to change it? Sometimes guys got to be punched in the mouth with some real
criticism. Is not hate, and praise is not fandom. When I'm criticizing Lauer, it's because I think he's better.
Neil, are you a basketball fan?
I love hoops, man. I grew up in the state of Indiana.
Oh,
I came out the womb dribbling. You know what I'm saying? So, basketball was my first love as far as sports I played. I love hoops, and what Chris and Lauro have going on, and even like piggybacking off of that, the household of Ellis,
yes.
what those guys got going on.
Yes.
I mean, we have some great hoops content going out right now, man. I love that stuff.
Yeah, a little inside information. C-Red Radio, they had a show on just before us. It started at about 6:05 p.m. And they have all of this fabulous energy and great ideas, and it's like 10 minutes before showtime, and then we want to do this and then we want to do that, and I'm like furiously trying to get everything together, and then the show goes off without a hitch. Well, there were a couple blemishes, all on me. Those guys were great. Their passion for the Chicago Bulls, their knowledge of the Bulls and so forth. It was a fun show. And then we've got Bulls 101 on Saturday night, so we're really blessed to have some good programming here. The Blackhawks show. Are you a Blackhawks fan or a hockey fan?
Yeah, absolutely, man. All of it. All the Chicago sports, Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, and I have to get behind the Sox a little bit because they're the only franchise that's worth the shit right now in the city.
What were your thoughts about that no-hitter, almost perfect game?
Man, I tuned into it late because I was watching. What did I have on at the time?
Probably the Bulls.
Yeah, actually, yeah, you're right. I had the Bulls on at the time. Just the
I
bitter
won
disappointment of.
I won $200 on that game. I bet for the Magic because I just figured something is in the air. The Bulls are going to bomb. And so
You are such a degenerate. Betting against your team, you're such a degenerate. Aldo. I'm so disappointed in you.
I am. I felt so guilty. At one point, the Bulls in the fourth quarter were making a run because they were losing by like 20, an average of 20 throughout most of the game. And then they start making this run and they were down to inside of double digits. And I was like, it would be nice if they won, but man, it would be nice to win that $200 too. So.
These guys got to learn how to finish. I mean, it's weird because the MO for the past couple of weeks was that they get leads, they go into the second half, and they blow it. And this time they fought their way back and couldn't complete the comeback. But I think the thing that we all just got to calm down as Bulls fans a little bit. You know, my one buddy that I talk to all the time about Chicago sports lives in North Carolina. Actually, he's in Virginia now, Virginia Beach. But massive, Chicago everything fan just like me. And the minute that we completed that trade for Vooch, he's like, "You think this is a great thing?" It was just like the first half of the first game when everybody was together. It's like, you thought this was a good deal. I was like, dude, do you marinate the steak like 3 minutes? Damn right you don't. Just cool down, let it come together because it will. I think AK has shown that he's done nothing but make great moves since he's been in Chicago. So just let the guy do his thing. Let's just sit back, relax, and just let this thing marinate. And we're gonna have a medium rare grilled, New York strip or filet mignon or something by the time it's over with.
Yeah, whatever it is, it'll be tasty. Although I have to say that my only concern, and I think Danny's always saying I hate to trade draft picks. I bet you feel the same way. And so trading draft picks for Vooch, I know you had to do it, but man, I just hate the fact. Now the blessing is that they are top 4 protected, so that's a cool thing. But I always believe in building teams through the draft, which is what we do here on this show, Draft on Tap, building a team through the draft. So what we're going to do is we're going to share your top 10 inside linebackers. And because Danny is out celebrating his birthday with his son, Christian, Danny and Neil and I will be back here tomorrow night, and Danny will share his top 10, and we'll have a discussion about that and also have some other cool extras. Before we reveal your top 10 inside linebackers, Neil, tell me what you think about the state of the inside linebacker core with the Chicago Bears right now. How high of a priority is it? A quick assessment on the guys on the roster who play that position before we start talking about the prospects.
Well, I think if you look at everything that I had previously said on the show up until we got rid of Kyle Fuller, I think I had inside linebacker as a third most necessary position to address in this draft. I think the letting Kyle Fuller go presents an interesting situation because I think at the top half of this draft, the cornerback class is very, very fertile. And so it'd be really hard to pass up on a tall, lanky, explosive, fast, quick, ball hawking, what was that word that Dane used? He had a great word.
Yeah.
Route magnet.
There you go.
He's a route there is like 5 of those in this draft. And there's still even beyond the elite 5, there's still another probably, 5 to 10 that will probably have a chance to start immediately. And so I think when you look at the first 3 or 4 rounds, we do need another corner in that room that can function at a high level. Trufant has done it at a high level for a while. He's had injury issues, the whole thing. I know we all have our concerns. Danny's probably more concerned about him than I am. But that's a weird position that we need to address. I'm not sure if Vildor's ready to take the reins if Trufant doesn't work out. Trufant kind of feels a little bit like Prince to me in a way. But I think he's still got more mileage on in the tank than Prince. So that makes me feel a little bit better. But at the same time, you got to get another dude on the edge because when we were really good on defense, we had Akeem in the middle and we had a rock solid inside linebacker, borderline Hall of Famer inside linebacker, and then we had 2 legit corners. And I'm talking about 10 years ago when we're in the Super Bowl, right? So I think that's that's a key position that we need to address, whether it's in the first 3 rounds, or whether it's round 4 or 5. I think it's a very deep class. The inside linebacker class is not as deep. And so that may be why I rank inside linebacker a little bit higher than corner on the hierarchy of important, needs to address.
That makes sense. But yeah, I'm with you. Isn't it weird? Prior to the start of free agency, we had cornerback listed, probably in the middle or lower middle of needs for the Chicago Bears. And then when Kyle Fuller was released by the Chicago Bears, all of a sudden it's shot up to a really important need. You got Jalen Johnson, who's had a bum shoulder, so you don't know really if he can play a 16-game NFL regular season. You've got an old vet in Desmond Trufant, who over the last 2 seasons has missed time with injuries. I have a feeling, Neil, that cornerback is going, if they can't make that move for a quarterback, for one of the top 5 quarterbacks, that the Bears might be selecting a cornerback in that first round. And there's some good ones, like you said, in that first round. And then there's that fall off. All right. You ready to talk inside linebackers?
Do it, man.
All
ready
right.
to rock.
Your first inside linebacker, and I don't think anybody in the world is surprised by that. It's a kid from Penn State. Tell us what you've seen on tape about Micah Parsons.
Before I go into Micah, I think the interesting thing about this linebacker class, like I was talking about in terms of trying to prioritize inside linebacker versus corner, I think one of the biggest liabilities in inside linebacker right now, in the interior of the linebacking core right now, is Dane Trevathan. Dane Trevathan, he's getting older. He looks like he's slowed down a little bit. He's lost a step, and that's extremely concerning. And I think it showed up plenty of times on game film from last year, giving up big plays, giving up scores, especially in the passing game. He is not able to hang with tailbacks or tight ends in route. And so, the thing about the inside linebacker position to me is that in this particular class, I think you have a really solid group of about, let's see, I have about 20, in the neighborhood of 20 with grades. I think you have a solid group of about, 9 to 11 that are worth taking and feeling good about. And within those 9 to 11, I think the top 4 are borderline special. And so, I think, when you look at draft value, okay, when you look at draft value, how unique you are determines how valuable and how high you go. And so when I look at these top 4, Micah is obviously the first one that I think about when I think about absurdly valuable inside linebackers. You got a guy that, everybody knows that he blew up his junior day. For those that don't know the numbers, he's a hair over 6'3", 246 pounds. His length measurables, he's 11 in the hands, 31 and a half in the arms, 78, almost 79 in wingspan. Just a big, long dude. Ran a 4.39 in the 40, a 4.4 shuttle, which is kind of odd and bizarre because he doesn't necessarily show that. The odd thing about having a shuttle that's higher than your 40 always typically means that you're stiff. He doesn't really show stiffness on tape, but he's got explosions, a 34 vert and a 10.6 broad, and he can move side to side clearly by that 6.94 L cone. So like the L cone and the short shuttle don't really match up, which I didn't get a chance to actually watch his pro day. I wonder if he stumbled. I wonder if he had a false start. I wonder if he did something that made his time a little bit worse than it is because that 4.4 shuttle doesn't show up on tape. All that aside, you're talking about guys with 2020 opt-out, declared for the draft on August 1st when we thought that we weren't going to have Big Ten football. And so he just went ahead and stayed true to that and prepared for the draft. Only spent 1 year as a full-time starter. 13 games, 12 starts in 2019 after being a role guy, previously. But in that game in that year that he was starting full-time, 109 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, a fumble recovered, 4 quarterback hits, and 5 breakups. I mean, you're talking about a dude that's just an all-out playmaker. And he has unbelievable athletic traits. From size to speed to twitch to explosion. He's super unique. Also extremely versatile with exceptional range. He could be used inside or outside. He can stop the run and cover. He can rush off the edge or get to quarterback at blitz packages, can play sideline to sideline and play in the box. And the thing that I love about him, similar to like what we're talking about with offensive linemen, he's just physical and violent. He comes downhill with a tremendous speed and burst and malicious intent. And the same goes for his closing speed. He takes minimal steps to get to the quarterback or the running back in the backfield. These tackles for loss speak for themselves. He has effortless change of direction without losing momentum. His athletic ability is off the charts for his size and his position. I think his biggest growth nugget is as a guy who hasn't played a ton of linebacker. And you talk about a guy that in high school was effectively a defensive athlete, right? You're talking about a guy who was a linebacker, mainly a defensive end. When I was at Mississippi State, I had him on our board as a defensive end prospect because we needed somebody that was just explosive and athletic and physical and violent coming off the edge and terrorizing the opposition's quarterback. And so I think he just needs to continue to grow playing that position. I think sometimes you can see there's just a little bit of rawness in the way that he plays the game. He's got to just absorb the nuances, work on the instincts. All the traits are there. All the physical athletic traits are there. The concerns are, if you guys pay attention to his recruiting process and all the smoke around that, he has perceptive character issues. And I say perceptive because everything that he's done since high school, and really his freshman year, he got into a little bit of an altercation his freshman year at Penn State. But everything since then has been squeaky clean. And so usually, you get a guy like that learns from his mistakes and you listen to him talk. He's a guy that he seems very sincere and he seems very remorseful. And he seems like a guy that's very authentic and open and transparent about those things that have happened in his past. Right. So I think it seems like those are non-issues. And all of that is behind him. I think he's an elite prospect. I won't be surprised if he ends up being a top 10 guy by the end of the day.
Yeah, and the incident, or one of the incidents, I guess, I don't know if there's more than one to be fair, but there was some kind of a hazing incident and there was a civil lawsuit. And while he was not named as a defendant in that civil lawsuit, he was named in the lawsuit as having participated in this hazing incident. And so hopefully, that's not going to be an issue moving forward or even wasn't an issue, but I don't know the legalities behind it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know all the details within the case. I mean, clearly I'm not within the four walls of that university, but if I could draw a parallel, Jeffrey Simmons at Mississippi State was a guy that had a similar serious situation. And then, obviously it popped up before he was in college, with the fight. It was a family issue. And I can go into like all the details around it. I don't think that's relevant, but the point is that, it was a very serious issue that got covered on a nationwide level. And it was especially at a time when the frivolity of, domestic violence was really peaking. And so I think the details behind that particular incident versus the details around a lot of other incidents that have happened across the league and across the country were so unique in and unto themselves. And the parallel that I mean to draw, though, is such that, you have a guy that had a very serious situation, serious allegation, or just being involved in something that is a serious black eye. And ever since then, he's just been nothing but, remorseful, working his way out of it, transparent about it, understanding and acceptive, and working in his way to being a better person. I think in the post pro day interviews that he talked. I think it was on NFL Network, or it might have been a private interview, or whatever the case may be. He talked about how he doesn't want his son, or I can't remember if it's his son or daughter. He doesn't want his kid growing up and having the vision of his dad being a bad guy. And so I think, a lot of times you have different motivational factors that really accelerate the growth and maturity process. And I think that's what we have here in this case.
Well, and your discussion on this just brings up that point about how challenging it is for a scout, because they've got to dig out all this information. It's not just about evaluating the play on the field, but it's also evaluating character. And I remember listening to Daniel Jeremiah talk about how he would not only talk to coaches and family and friends and fellow students, but he would pore over newspapers to see what reports were done on the athlete. He acquired all this information to try to get as clear a portrait over who the person was, not just the player. So it's quite the challenge for you guys to do this for a living.
100%.
By the way, Dane says about Parsons, Overall, he's an impressive size, speed, strength athlete with the reaction to movement and combative mentality to develop into a cornerstone defender and 3-down linebacker for an NFL team. Can you just picture? I mean, if it's not going to happen. I'll go on DraftKings and bet this right now. He's not going to line up next to Roquan Smith. Really
Careful.
It's highly unlikely he'll be lining up next to Roquan Smith. But boy, what a duel that would be, huh?
That's a wet dream right there, is what that is. I mean, that's like having Briggs and Urlacher back again. That's like having Wilbur Marshall and Mike Singletary back again. Otis, and I mean that's wow.
Yeah, Butkus and Buffon. That's how old I am.
Butkus and Buffon. There you go.
All right, number 2 on your list, and I'm going to allow you to pronounce the name because I would just screw it up like I did Parsons' first name. Tell us who it is and why you have him at number 2.
Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Now he's probably more of an exact fit for an outside linebacker in a 4-3 scheme, admittedly. I understand that, he weighed in at 6'1", 221 for his pro day. He probably played at 205, 210, 215, somewhere in there. Definitely put a lot of weight on between the season and now. He is 10 pounds lighter than our lightest linebacker. And a lot of times a guy that plays in the middle, you want him to be a little bit heavier, a little bit beefier, have a little bit more mass on his bones. I think a lot of times you look at, again, uniquity. And he has the kind of unique that is really, really hard to pass up. And I think if you're in a position to take this kid, if he's available to you, it'd be really hard to say no. And so that's why I have him at number 2, even though he might not be a perfect fit. I think what he's going to do is he's going to come in and present you some flexibility, really, in schematics. You look at what he did for his pro day. He's about a 9-inch hand. He's a 33-inch arm, long-ass arms, 78 and an 8th wingspan. Didn't run the 40. But he did rock a 4.15 in the shuttle, explosive numbers in a 36.5 vert, a 10'4" broad, and his 3-cone was off the charts at 6.8. I mean, that he's got some elite numbers. But again, another unique prospect that just brings explosiveness and violence to the table. While not as physically imposing as Micah Parsons, he plays with a similar level of explosion, violence, aggressiveness. Really was a hybrid position in the Notre Dame defense. He was more like a rover safety, right? Which is, sort of a unique thing for Notre Dame to have a guy with that elite level talent at that position. They don't typically get those kind of guys often. But, like I said, he showed up to pro day 15-inch pounds heavier than he reportedly played at this fall. Put up the beautiful numbers, impressive workout, eye-popping stuff. Size and strength will be the biggest questions that would prevent him from really working with the Bears. He's almost 10 pounds lighter, like I said, than the lightest in the room. He's shown his biggest weakness is fending off blocks. To me, it really comes down to if he can add strength in the weight and not lose the athletic traits to become better at defeating blocks and being functional at the line of scrimmage and not really getting washed out in the type of scheme that we have here in Chicago, being that 3-4. He's got all the other tools that I love in a linebacker, obviously besides the besides the physical and athletic traits, he shows a great deal of instincts and football intelligence. Really good with his eyes and play recognition. Love the way he plays. He's got the questions related to size and strength. But I love, both him and Micah. I love both of these dudes' energy. It's infectious.
Pretty cool stuff. And this is what Dane says about him. He will have his share of undisciplined plays, but his one-step explosion, playmaking range, and intelligence gives his coaches flexibility to deploy him at linebacker, safety, or nickel. And then he goes on to say that he could be like an invaluable chess piece to defensive coordinators. Yeah, he's a great player. You love Notre Dame football just as much as I do, so I know you've watched him every Saturday like I have. He's a special guy. It would be really cool to have him wear the navy blue and burnt orange. All right, let's move on to number 3 on your list. It's a kid from Tulsa. I think I can pronounce this name correctly. Zaven Collins. Did I get
Got
it?
All right. Got it. Yeah, I mean, again, unique. Here's a guy who actually has like absurdly large numbers. He measured at 6'5", 259 and played that at that size throughout the course of really the past 3 or so seasons. Just a big dude. And he was a guy that actually had on my edge board, however many months ago that was. We were talking the edge position. He was a guy I was considering for that board. I feel like he's a hell of a lot more natural at the second level than he is on the line and having to deal with hand-to-hand combat on a play-by-play basis. Here's a guy who ran 4.67 at his pro day at 200, almost 260 pounds, jumped a 35-inch vertical and a 10'2" broad jump. Fast, explosive, and you see all of that on film. He's a 3-year starter for Tulsa. He had a highly productive 2020 with the minimal games that they played, 54 tackles, 7.5 TFLs, 4 sacks, 4 picks, 2 of which were pick sixes. He had 2 PBUs, 2 forced fumbles, a safety, and a fumble recovery. He was a National Defensive Player of the Year. He won the Nagurski, the Bednarik, the Lombardi. He was on all these lists, won all these trophies. Another entirely unique physical specimen with that size, that explosion, that vert, that broad jump. Elite levels, like just beyond elite levels for a guy this size at this position. Arguably the most unique guy we have in this position group. He's another guy that could project a number of different positions. I mentioned how I consider him for my edge board. He's a much more instinctive player at the second level than he is on the ball, and I say that really favoring how he gets after the quarterback in blitz or pass rush situations. He has a great first step, powerful burst, bends the edge really well, and he has closing speed to the quarterback. He possesses excellent upper body power and strength. As big, as strong, as powerful as he is, he's a tough dude to scheme around. He's best when he's playing forward, either pursuing the ball carrier or rushing the quarterback. A glider in the open field. Not as much of a twitched up player as these 2 other guys we talked about, but very fluid for his size. Takes good angles to the ball. I think in terms of concerns, if you have concerns, he has to work on his tackle technique more. He is a wrap up guy, but has shown a tendency of slipping off tackles. But he does give that sideline to sideline effort without the necessary speed to effectively be, rangy enough to be, all over the field, kind of like a spider, like, Jeremiah was, but he can get the job done. He can get to the edges on the perimeter. He still has some room for growth and gap recognition. He'll either, in terms of that, he'll either miss a play or he'll be too hesitant, get washed out at times. Misdirection will get him way too often for me to be considered a first-round pick. And, while his athletic ability versus size is unique, quicker players will beat him in the passing game at times. With all that, I still feel he's a 3-down guy. He's unique. There's a lot to work with there in terms of having a floor. And, a creative DC, I think we'll have to be able to use him in different ways. We'll have the ability to be able to use him in different ways. Presents a ton of value against the run and the pass rush. So I think with a little bit of coaching, with a little bit of seasoning, he's definitely 100% going to upgrade the room.
I love the phrase that you used for Parsons, hitting with malicious intent. Where is Collins in that area of hitting people with malicious intent?
Mike is just special in that category. It's almost unfair to compare him. It's like walking on stage after Michael Jackson performs. You know what I mean? Yeah. You can't just put anybody else up there. But he, as big as he is, as explosive as he is, as physical as he is, he will thump the hell out of you. And so, a lot of times what you look for is just a guy who's just going to hold his own from a physical and power standpoint, and he does that. I love the way that he plays the game. He's got a couple things that just, like I said, just need a little bit of seasoning, a couple things to work on, coached up a little bit more. He's a guy that played all over the field for Tulsa. He never really they had him, like I said, rushing off the edge, playing inside linebacker. They had him out in space, covering the nickel. He was doing a lot of different kinds of things, and he's not going to be that versatile. For the Bears.
Right.
And so I think just, getting in that room and preparing to play that position this fall, he's going to be fine. Just needs a little bit more coaching up. But I think he's a hop, skip, and a jump away from being a first-round guy.
Alex Sims, is in the chat room, and he says Collins smells a little like Blake Martinez to him with a little bit more upside. One thing about Blake Martinez, the linebacker out of Stanford who played with the Packers, I'm not sure what team he's in with now. I want to say the Eagles maybe, but nonetheless, he's a really hard-working, smart guy, and that's how he's made up for his deficiencies, athletic deficiencies. So is there you see a comparison there between Collins and Martinez?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with Blake Martinez. I admittedly haven't watched a whole lot of him. However, I do agree that, he's a smart kid that does overcome some of his athletic deficiencies. Not that he has a lot of them, but, he didn't, or I'm not sure if I'm not sure if it was that he didn't do them or if we just don't have those numbers, but we don't have the mobility numbers. We don't have the shuttle. We don't have the 3-cone. We don't know what we would have the video of what that looks like. You can see it on tape, and sometimes he can get stuck in the mud. But I think overall, like, he has enough athletic ability for the size that he is, and he has the explosion to be able to overcome. He has the smarts to be able to put himself in position. And again, once he gets in the NFL locker room and he gets coached up by NFL guys, I think he's going to be fine.
You've made reference to the 3-cone a number of times. Why is the 3-cone drill important for scouts?
Well, what that does is it measures your ability to change direction, to explode, and to also bend. The 5-10-5 shuttle is able to measure your side-to-side mobility. The 3-cone, you go forward and back, and then forward and around, and cut, and back, around, and finish. And you have to be as close as you can cutting around these cones. You have to explode forward, change direction, come back, explode back forward, show speed, show agility. It's really a measure of like all the things put together into one drill. And when you have a big guy like that moving that fast and that explosive, that's a special thing.
Very cool. This is what Dane Brugler says about Collins. He isn't overly explosive, but he has a unique blend of size, range, and instincts for the position, with the scheme versatility to be a starting outside linebacker in a 3-4 or an inside or outside linebacker in a 4-3. All right, let's move on now to number 4 on your list. You've actually got a couple of Ohio State guys at number 4. Yeah. You've got Aaron Browning.
I've got 4 draft grades on Ohio State linebackers. Which that is a very talented class they have there at Ohio State. Barroom Browning, I think, is the most intriguing of the 4. He's a guy that he measured in a 6'3", 245 at his pro day. He was also a Senior Bowl guy, and the numbers were pretty much spot on there when he was on Mobile too. He measured in 4 pounds heavier, here this past month. But 10-inch hands, 33-inch arms. They had him at 33.5 during pro day. 81 on the wingspan. So, you're talking about a dude that, pretty much like average size, but length in his arms, length in his wingspan. It helps tremendously when it comes to fighting off blocks. Ran 4.51 in the 40, 4.23 in the short shuttle. Correspondingly, the 3-cone was an astounding 6.78. Explosion numbers: 40-inch vert, 10-10 broad, elite as hell, and 23 reps on the bench. So he's strong. In 7 games this year, 30 tackles, 3 TFLs, and a sack, after a breakout 2019 season where he finished with 40 tackles, 10 TFLs, and 5 sacks. That's really where he really, kind of made a name for himself as a playmaking guy in Ohio State scheme there. He lines up at both inside linebacker and edge positions, and also out wide as a space player over the nickel spot. Or you're also covering tight end as well, but shows the same speed and burst on film as he showed in his pro day. If you guys watched the pro day, he looked exceptional in the testing and the drills. Moved really well, was explosive, was quick, sudden, short area, burst was off the charts. I mean, this kid has great size and length as well. Possesses these special athletic traits, and it shows on his film. His reactionary athleticism is top class. He's the type of kid that when he sees it, he's shot out of a cannon. Very quick feet, which allows for a quick change of direction, plays fast and aggressive with great leverage and tackling instincts. Both smooth and fluid in the open field, which, that's often, 2 terms that you can kind of lump together, but they're definitely 2 different things. If you're smooth, you're being efficient. If you're fluid, that more or less refers to your ability to move your extremities, be loose in your hips, flip them, and, change direction that way. His ability to be smooth, fluid, basically be an athlete in the open field is really nice. He's an absolute sideline to sideline player, and he's great in pursuit. You often see him hustling downfield to chase down a ball carrier, make a play. Both of these Ohio State guys I have back to back here, him and Pete Werner, they show great effort and hustle. Barron, I think between the 2 of those guys, I was kind of back and forth a little bit on these guys. Barron, to me, has the athletic traits to be able to produce and make plays literally all over the field, and the ability to recover, when he's caught out of position, which is also critically important. The big, like, defining, I was talking about Tevin Jenkins earlier, guys that have defining plays or defining games. Penn State, to me, this past season was a defining game for Barroom Browning. Penn State this past season had a couple of stellar plays and really good examples of hustle and effort, and being a sideline to sideline player, being able to make plays all over the field, hustling 40 yards downfield to chase down a ball carrier. In terms of being able to cover and being just basically an athlete. that the play in the end zone, breaking up pass that they were trying to complete to Freiermuth. He just elevated, met the ball at the high point, knocked it away. You're talking about plays that really to me stand out. And this kid, I think, he has a chance to be, a pretty decently high pick. I think he's an early day 2 kid for me right now. He's a guy that's also he's also had a little bit of first round chatter. In terms of concerns for me, he's got to be more of a sure tackler. I mean, a lot of these guys, they struggle in tackling, to be honest with you. I'm not sure if they do teach that very well at the collegiate level anymore, but he got to be more of a sure tackler. He does have some high school Harry about him at times, throwing shoulders in there and not really being, too technically sound. And, even though he is really good in pass coverage, it's still an improvement process for him, because it's not a natural thing to him. I think he played defensive end in high school. So, and then also, I mean, as a rotational guy at Ohio State, there'd be stretches where he wouldn't see the field. But again, they have 4 NFL guys. Out of the 4, I think he's easily the best prospect. He has the athletic ability to be able to play in space at the next level, the physicality to be able to produce inside and hang with the big boys, the upside to be able to continue to develop from a more raw prospect into a highly productive, technically sound, fundamentally, efficient, difference-making type player. And again, like another word I use with these other couple guys, energy. He's got great energy. Not only the way that he plays, but his emotions, things that are just infectious on a defense, really. And, the word is he's also a really high character guy as well, which also, matters and is critically important. So I love this kid.
I can tell. I can tell. Let's see what Dane Brugler over at The Athletic says in his draft guide called The Beast, and worth every penny. The subscription just to get the draft guide, the subscription to The Athletic is well worth it. Dane writes, Browning doesn't consistently play with anticipation, but he is physically impressive with the size, length, and athleticism to rush the passer or drop in coverage. I got to tell you something. One of the things I'm looking forward to next fall is you, Danny, and me, and maybe we can get some barflies. Some of the people like Alex Sims, and who else? Here's what Alex Sims says. Damn, Neil, you're not too high on Jamian Davis or Nick Bolton. Curious to see why. But what I was going to say is, just have a bunch of us together to watch some tape this fall or this summer, now that the pandemic is easing and so forth. We can all get to watch some tape, have some beers and
dope sessions. Hell yeah.
Yeah, that would be a blast.
Dope sessions.
Yes. So we'll answer Alex's question in a minute. Let's get on to your next player. Number 5, it happens to be a guy from Ohio State too, Pete Werner.
Pete Werner. He's a really interesting kid. A guy that was originally a safety, coming out of high school. A guy that really grew on me, towards the second half of the year. Really, the postseason games, the semifinal game, the national title game, he played really well the second half of the year, and then also in the pro day, I saw a lot of things that, again, I always talk about affirmation, not confirmation. There's things I would see on tape that I was sometimes questioned, but he really showed out on pro day and answered a lot of those questions to me. 6'3", 238, 9 hands, 33 and a quarter arms. Another guy that's good solid size and long, big barrel chested kid. If you saw him in shorts and t-shirts, if you watch his pro day. Another guy that tested really well with a 4.52 40, 4.38 shuttle, and a 6.95 cone. Anytime you get a dude that plays that mid skill level that can get under 7 seconds in the cone, those are elite numbers, right? Just so you guys are keeping score. Those are elite numbers. In terms of being elite, you look at his explosion stuff, 40 on the vert and 10'2" on the broad. Guys that big jumping that high, also very much on the elite scale.
Mm-hmm.
This past season, 8 games, 54 tackles, 2.5 for loss, 1 sack. He was a second leading tackler in 2019. I touched on, he was a former high school safety. Came in to play that position, grew into a linebacker. They probably had him on the board at outside linebacker in terms of a guy that was a little bit thicker in high school that they can develop into an athletic, second level player. Great thick build, especially in his uppers. I talked about how, barrel chested he is, plays inside linebacker and out in space. Very solid, instinctive, technically sound all around linebacker with great play speed and plays just as fast laterally as he does moving forward. He utilizes good leverage. He's a physical tackler, heavy hitter, demonstrates the near leg, near shoulder mechanics that is often taught by the really good linebacker coaches, at the college level. And he's a kid that's from Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm pretty sure he's from Cathedral High School, and they teach really good fundamentals at the high school as well. He's very smooth in space and in pass coverage, as he should be given his background. He reacts quickly to the ball, flows well to the play, has the speed and range to be able to play sideline to sideline effectively. He has the ability to bring disruption on blitzes, muddy things up at the line of scrimmage, brings versatility. But a guy I see excelling more as a box player for a team like Chicago. To me, like his concerns, he lacks elite twitch and quickness sometimes on the field, and those were things I was really looking for during his pro day. But sometimes play speed is different than what you look like in the underwear Olympics, right? And while he has great play speed, he really only has one speed, I feel, and he lacks elite closing burst when he's tackling. I think he needs to improve shedding blocks. From a football intelligence standpoint, everything is still a learning process for him. He's a young linebacker and still needs seasoning. He may not have the elite explosive traits on the field, but he's a very smooth, big, athletic, physical player. Plays with great effort, tackling instincts, technique. Just the way that he moves around the field, he moves around space, he flows to the ball. It's kind of a pretty thing to watch. He's a very well coached player at all areas. As he was growing up, it looks like. He's another guy with a ton of upside and room for growth.
Very cool. And this is what Dane says over at The Athletic, that Werner needs to clean up some inconsistent tendencies, but he has outstanding lateral range and his sights are always on the football. He projects as a versatile linebacker with 4-down potential.
100%.
Sounds pretty much like you guys agree on Pete Werner. Let's move on to number 6 on your list. This is a guy whose name you've brought up a number of times during the past several weeks. He's got a brother who is going to be in the draft too. But right now we're talking about Chaz Surratt from North Carolina. Why do you like him so much?
Chaz Surratt, another guy that was in Mobile, another guy that did pretty well at his pro day. Not as elite in some of these numbers that we talked about earlier, but you're talking about a guy that's a hair over 6'2", 229 pounds, 9.5 hands, 30 inch arms and 76 inches on the wingspan. Are very average numbers for a kid with that size. He's a guy that ran 4.58 and 4.6 in the 40, a 4.16 on the shuttle, 7.02 on the cone, 31 vert, and then 25 bench reps, which is pretty good. For a second level player. Once you get into the mid 20s, you're borderline elite levels as far as strength goes. I love this kid in terms of his history. His background and really what he brought to this team. He's one of the few players that have started at 2 different positions on opposite sides of the ball throughout his career. He came into North Carolina as a quarterback, made 7 starts at quarterback as a redshirt freshman. And then 2 years later, he's a first-team All-ACC linebacker with 115 tackles, 15 for loss, 6.5 sacks, and 10 quarterback hurries, which is absurd if you think about that. A kid that's never played the linebacker position before. He was a all everything quarterback in high school, right? And he comes in to play a particular position, was average as the day is long, goes ahead and switches over to another position in the spring before he starts at that position, 8 months prior basically, and ends up being I think it was like first team All ACC, right? That's incredible to me. That shows that he's able to learn at a very high level, at a very quick level, and he's highly coachable. And he's obviously a team player because he goes from a position with absurd levels of leadership and ownership of a team to really he's a guy that's running the defense. But the quarterback, everybody looks to the quarterback, right? So it's glory versus the grunge essentially is what that is.
Right.
But that fall in his first game versus South Carolina, his first game ever playing the position of linebacker, he racked up 12 tackles, a sack, pass broken up, and a quarterback hurry. So I mean, he was, again, I mean, you go back into his history as well. I mean, he was a big time hooper in high school. He was an all-state player, male athlete of the year as a hooper. So in terms of his athletic pedigree, he's a type of kid that you can bring into any situation and be pretty confident in the fact that he's going to, number one, learn the material, number two, fall in line, and number three, do what it takes to be successful. And so those are incredibly attractive traits in a guy that, especially one of these kind of guys who's still very, very young at the position. Mm-hmm. I think what you see with him on tape correlates pretty well with what you got from his pro day. Testing was kind of middle of the pack. He's got decent size, below average length numbers. Chaz is a guy that will bring a lot of positives, though. He can make himself small at the line of scrimmage in sort of like a pass rusher type of way. Plays with great energy and motor. He's great in pursuit, very laterally quick, easy to change direction, and very fluid in the open field. He's an all-around good athlete. He's smart. I talk about him being a quarterback and an everything kid in high school. He brings a lot of leadership and a very high character profile to the mix as well. I think with him, if you separate him from the top half of this list, he just lacks the elite qualities like the explosion, like the closing burst, the physicality, the play strength that some of these other guys bring to the table. He's not a 100% sure tackler. He'll kind of love you down a little bit. He won't drive through you as a ball carrier. I think at times, he struggles disengaging from blocks, gets washed out by offensive linemen. But again, still young to the position. He needs to be coached up. He needs to learn. He's got to garner the nuances, of playing the linebacker position. But I mean, all that is promising with the traits he does possess, has a ton of room to grow. And I think he should be productive early as a role player at the very worst. And I think, as he, grows into being a, 3 or 4 down guy, he's going to be a demon on special teams. I think, as a late day 2 guy, I don't think you can go wrong with Chaz Surratt.
Yeah, Dane Brugler says that he checks all the boxes for body fluidity, chase skills, pursuit, acceleration. And then he adds that Surratt must improve his run fits and develop in several areas, but he has the athleticism, instincts, and competitive toughness to be a high-volume tackler and a run-around weak side linebacker in the NFL. So this guy is a name to remember. He's going to be in the NFL for quite some time is the bet here. Mm-hmm. I got to tell you that Alex Sims is in the chat room, and he's starting to seethe. How come my guys?
Relax, man. Relax. It's coming.
I can tell you this, Alex.
Is a virtue.
I can tell you this, Alex. This next guy is not one of the 2 guys that you want to see in the list, but it's coming up. We're going to talk now about Dylan Moses from Alabama. I love this guy. What do you got to say about Moses?
Dylan Moses is a guy I would have second on the list at the end of the 2018 season. Mm-hmm. And it'd be easy. And in fact, it would be Micah and Dylan, and then you can have like a massive gap, and then it'll be the rest of these guys because it would be those 2 guys, and there would be no other conversations. Dylan, though, he's a dude that he ruptured his ACL in 2019. He had a foot at the end. Let's see, at the end of 2017, which affected him, late, in the year and those, playoff games. Played with a torn meniscus in 2020, that he suffered during week 3 versus Ole Miss. And so, I mean, you look at, this kid's play history, over the course of his collegiate career, and you're looking at a guy that has a pretty substantial injury history. And, to what level that's concerning, I think it is still to be really kind of discerned. And the thing that makes him really unique, though, and really interesting is that you look at that 2018 film and you got a dude that is just absurdly explosive. I think that, during 2020, when you look at the difference between 2018 and 2020, you saw a guy that was a little bit more of a shell of what he was. But he was playing the entire year on a torn meniscus, and I can almost, guarantee you that he wasn't 100% healthy starting off the year to begin with. And so, playing off of a not fully rehabbed ACL, he tears meniscus. I'm not sure if it was same knee or oppo knee, but he tears meniscus, plays on that the entire year. If nothing else, that tells you that kid's tough as nails.
Yep.
Right. So in terms of his chemical makeup, tough as hell, team captain, so he has a ton of leadership. Football intelligence is off the charts. He makes all the calls for the best, the best team in the country, right? So I mean, you look at you begin to sort of like compartmentalize the things in his profile, and I think when you look at Dylan Moses as potentially a late day 2 pick, what you really are betting on is the fact that he's going to return to normal. I think it's really what you're betting on. I mean, even a shell of Dylan Moses is still a pretty productive Dylan Moses with concerns, obviously. You know, the interesting thing about, you know, he was asked about. I wish I had the transcript, you know, copied and pulled up, but I don't. I'm just going to try and, you know, play this off memory. But they asked him about the torn meniscus. At what point he felt like, you know, he should say something. Did it affect him throughout the year? You know, basically like tell us about it. And he said basically he never said anything about it because, you know, even though he's in pain, he never wants to leave the field. Which, I mean, I love the hell out of that. You know, the kid just loves to compete. He loves to play, and he'll play with, you know, something broken or something busted, and still be effective. You know, he had 80 tackles this year, 6.5 for loss, a sack and a half, 3 PBUs, a forced fumble, and a pick. It wasn't like he was just a stiff running around out there. Even though, again, like he didn't look like the same elite dude that he did back in 2018. But you know, he's still a hell of a player. Again, I'm just concerned about his ability to stay healthy with the 3 significant injuries now that have had him out of, you know, games or workouts. But, you know, this is a guy, I mean, you talk about history, you talk about past, you talk about where he's come from. He's got a really unique deal. He's one of these guys that, you know, was in the spotlight as a 7th grader. You know, they called him the man-child. And he started getting big-time offers in 8th grade. You know, Texas, LSU, Alabama, right off the bat, boom, boom, boom. He's all of a sudden getting pulled in every which way in the recruiting process. As a kid that's barely able to process what the hell is going on to begin with. He's just lucky that he had good leadership in the house. His father was basically his champion. And, you know, if not to a vocal level, but he's basically like a LeVar Ball like type dude, right? Like he pushed his kid, he was on his kid, not at a detrimental level, but he was the coach in the household that was able to groom this kid to be what he is. You know, I talk about that ridiculously productive 2018. Correspondingly came with 2020 draft buzz pre-injury. He was thinking about coming out for the 2020 draft, even though he had this busted ACL, knowing that somebody's going to go ahead and pick him up early. You know, the first 5 games of 2020, you know, moving forward, you know, were incredibly productive before that knee really began to slow him down. Like you kind of saw a little bit of a tipping point where at that point he's just trying to maintain. You know, the production was down. But, you know, he's still out there doing his thing, giving all the effort in the world. You know, I think you throw in any game and within a handful of snaps, if you go back to 2018 to really like get to really get a decent perspective on what this kid is, you throw in any game in the year 2018 and within a handful of snaps, you see why he was projected as a day 1 guy. All right. The quickness, the explosiveness, the suddenness, the physicality, sideline to sideline motor, ability to play both the run and the pass. He's got that malicious intent about him that I talk about with a couple of these other guys. Reportedly ran in the 4.4s. I think he was clocked at a 4.46 at Alabama. Wow. He had a vert in the mid 30s. I think it was around 35 or 36. In terms of strength numbers, I talk about how strong this kid plays. Strength numbers, he has a 405 max. He has a 500 squat max, a 335 clean max. I mean, you know, really, he has the play history to be able to say, like, yeah, he's interesting enough to go ahead and take a high chance on. And by high chance, again, I mean probably like a 3rd round pick on this guy. Just basically rolling the dice and hoping that he can return to that 2018 level. But you know, again, it just depends on the medical evaluation to me. He's a hell of a steal if he's able to get back to old Dylan.
Yeah. I look at this guy and I think Eddie Jackson. I think, you know, Ryan Pace plucked Eddie Jackson, what was it, in the 5th round?
I think you're right.
And he dropped that far because of the broken leg. Well, Moses has had more injury concerns. So I see this guy as a potential day 3 draft steal. See what Dane Brugler has to say. He has the potential and competitive profile of a potential NFL starter, but he doesn't have the tape of a playmaker, and his surgically repaired knee is a red flag. He projects as a mid-round lottery pick. What does he mean, mid-round lottery pick? Is that like lottery being taking a chance on him, and maybe he strikes gold. I guess that's
Yeah,
what he means by that.
essentially, yeah. I mean, you get yourself a lottery ticket and just try and take a chance on him,
Mhm.
which is really like I had him probably ideally as a probably fourth or fifth round guy given his 2020 tape. Then you go back and look at what he did during the 2018 season, and it's really hard not to be, at least a little bit intrigued and trigger happy when you look at what he did before he blew the knee. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't 100% back to normal. In terms of his healing process and his therapy and coming back to life as 2018 Dylan Moses, the old Dylan Moses that we saw tear up the SEC. So I can easily see one of these GMs saying, you know what, we're pretty set with most of our draft after round 1, round 2, round 3, or maybe just round 1, round 2, whatever. Taking a 3rd or 4th round, flyer on this kid and just seeing if he can possibly, strike gold with it. That's really what this kid is, and that's why I have him where I have him.
Yeah. As Aaron Current, one of the guys from the Barfly Tailgate show, says, we have 4 6-round draft picks. And so if Moses were to drop that far, that's
100% I'm using it.
That's a no-brainer.
Shoot the bullet, man. Shoot the bullet.
All right, I got good news for Alex Sims because he has been talking about Jamian Davis, his comp. He says for Davis is Darius Leonard. He is a coverage specialist who's a freak who can cover sideline to sideline, needs to improve in the run game, though. Well, guess what, Alex? The next guy on the list is indeed – oh, no, it's not.
No, it's not. I was about to say, what are we talking about?
Sorry.
You have Danny's list up there? What's going on?
Danny hasn't given me a damn list yet. It's Nick Bolton from Missouri. Jamian Davis is not in your top 10, is he?
Not in my top 10. And I'll tell you guys why after I finish off here.
Excellent.
So Nick Bolton. Barroom. The bar flies have been all over me on Nick Bolton. Like, where do you have Nick Bolton? Is he a 2nd-round guy? Do you like him at 52? Is like, I honestly, like, sure, I guess, maybe. I could see why people love him as a potential 1st-round guy, as a potential early day 2 guy. He's got a lot of interesting stuff, but to me, I see some things that concern me. Pro day numbers: a hair over 5'11", 237 pounds. Length numbers: 10.5 hands, 31, almost 32 arms, 76 and a quarter wingspan. A guy that small with that small of a wingspan and very average arm length kind of concerns me a little bit. 40 time was 4.59 and 4.6. He had a 4.5 shuttle, which isn't great. A 7.40 cone, which is very average. 32 vert, 9.7 broad. Explosion numbers are very average. Not that I put all the stock in the world on numbers, but you're already starting off as a small dude with average numbers. It's not a great floor, right? So building off the floor, you start looking at the film. Actually, not to start looking at the film. I've been looking at the film. It's just adding the numbers into it. If you look at the numbers first and then you go into the film, it's kind of the thought process you have. Mm-hmm. Productivity wise, I mean, he had 95 tackles this year, 7.5 for loss, 2 sacks. He's a 2-year starter. He's a highly energetic, high motor type of player that plays with great physicality. And again, your favorite word, that malicious intent on contact. Those are some of like the integral, attributes that I love in my linebackers. Right. But the testing numbers were just decent at pro day. Not eye popping by any standard. The best thing he showed was his speed, I think, on tape. The explosion numbers that you see at pro day, and the quickness numbers are things that you do see on tape. He's definitely a north-south guy. Being strong and physical, not particularly explosive on the field. He does show closing burst, and he puts some really nice flash plays on tape. Fundamentally, does a great job keeping his shoulders square as he navigates the second level, navigates traffic, makes his way through the trash. In terms of his size, though, that's where the concern comes in. His size and his length allows him to be very easily blocked. He struggles against getting lost in traffic at times when he's at the line of scrimmage. He displays the ability to wrap up or drive through ball carriers, which I love, but again, way too often slips off or misses tackles. Part of Part of the reason why I think I do love his aggressiveness. At times, that could cause him to miss plays because he's trying so hard to get there so quick and just lay a hit that sometimes he'll overrun the ball carrier. And I think those are just things that those are things that are teachable, and those are things that once he just really starts to really develop in an NFL system and becomes more poised at the position, he'll grow out of it. I think that's more of an immaturity thing than anything else. But I love the effort on this kid. I love the aggressiveness. I love the physicality. He reminds me a little bit of what Dane Trevathan reminded me of, like, when Dane Trevathan was in his first 3 years, right? I mean, not only because he has dreads, not only because he's 5'11", but I mean, just the way that he plays the game and the position that he plays, like it's a very easy comp, right? Ultimately, he's got all the positive traits. I think his size limitations and lack of versatility is what drops his value. Which to me itself is actually pretty high as a Mike. But again, you're talking about kind of a pigeonholed player that can really only function extremely well in the box, and outside of the box, you start to get into liability lane there. He's a guy that's at the next level. He's going to need space and holes with which to work with. He's not going to be able to create on his own, if that makes sense. The Bears D line as it stands right now is certainly going to help that. If Akeem Hicks does stick around in the middle, if those other guys across Goldman and Wilson and I'm blanking.
I'm
Nichols.
Yeah, there you go, Bilal Nichols.
If those guys have highly productive years and allow the linebackers to be able to just go to work, where they don't have to be functional in terms of creating plays on their own, then he's going to be a really good fit. But he's going to need things to be very neat and well developed in front of him, for him to be able to be highly successful.
Well, I got to tell you that our buddy Dane Brugler has him ranked a little bit higher than you, but he does have some concerns about him. He writes, Bolton must improve his consistency in coverage, but his play speed, instincts, and contact-driven mentality will translate to production. He projects as a three-down player if he continues to improve. And let me just look at the guide real quick. He has him ranked number 5 overall as a second-round grade. Where do you anticipate Bolton will be taken? Day 3 or late day 2 potentially?
I have him as one of the first picks going off the board on day 3, 4th round. And again, he's a guy that's really all over the place for a lot of people. He's a guy that you hear potential first, potential second. He's a guy that you hear, well, he's a 10th linebacker off the board. He's probably day 3. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are just all over the place on this kid because he does have some work to do in terms of his development, and he does have the size limitations, and he does have the lateral agility, drawbacks, at times, and I think that the overwhelming traits that he does have that are positives are the things that he absolutely needs because of his size limitations, and those are things that are unteachable. The kind of effort and physicality and toughness and nasty that he plays with are things that aren't teachable. And so, guys that have unteachable traits like that, will typically end up having some sort of success. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what that success is going to look like. Mm-hmm. And that's why I have him going where I have him going right now, which is not a detriment at all. That's not a, I should say that's not a detriment. It's not a knock at all whatsoever, because each and every single one of these 4 guys ahead of him have things that he doesn't have, which is size or elite athletic ability or elite explosion or, different variations of elite stuff, right, if that makes sense. And so, sure, he's probably the first guy off the board that doesn't have, the best, package deal as far as stuff, if that makes sense.
Well, it's going to be interesting tomorrow, 8 p.m. Central. It'll be Danny Shimon here presenting his top 10 inside linebackers, and the guys will compare notes on these inside linebackers. Maybe Alex Sims will be a little bit more satisfied with Danny's list. This is what Alex just said about what you said. I agree, Neil. His size will make it tough against tight ends, and even though he has decent speed, he can't keep up with running backs at the next level, but I feel like he has so much upside.
Yeah, he absolutely does. And, 4th round is where you typically take guys with upside. I felt that was appropriate where I had him. But again, he's got traits that project at different spots for different reasons for different teams, and he's gonna be one of those guys that, there's 32 teams with 32 different GMs, with 32 different schemes, and 32 different things going on and needs and everything else. He is gonna be all over the boards. He's not gonna be just one of these guys that shows up at this one position on everybody's board across the landscape of things. He's an interesting kid. I agree. He's got a ton of upside. It's just a matter of, he's a little bit more of a developmental guy, and a lot of times the fourth round is typically where those guys go.
Aaron Current of the Barflat Tailgate Show is in the house, and he says he downloaded the Beast yesterday, but he hasn't had a chance to thumb through it yet. So much information, you aren't kidding. 226,000 words. Holy cow. Crazy. All right, let's move on to the next guy on your list. It's number 9. I'm really interested in getting your take on Jabril Cox out of LSU.
Yeah, Jabril Cox from LSU and North Dakota State. He plays first 3 years with the Bison, won a couple national titles there. A guy that's just over 6'3", 232 pounds. 9-inch hands, 32 and a half arms, 79 wingspan. He's a guy that hasn't tested yet. He's working out for the scouts right around, I can't remember if it was today or tomorrow or if it's early next week. Okay. But he's going the middle of the month because he had a little bit of a hamstring issue. He didn't work out at the previous pro day that LSU put on, in March. But I'm really interested to see what he does, because I have a feeling that he could either run really fast or he's going to be a significant disappointment. But, he's a guy that in 2020, 58 tackles, 6.5 for loss, a sack, 3 picks, one of which was a pick 6, which is actually against my former employer, Mississippi State. Sort of a gift, but, he was still in the right place. He took it to the house, so you can't really knock him for that. His career at North Dakota State, though, 258 tackles, 32 for loss, 14 sacks, 6 picks, 8 PBUs. He's been basically an All-American since he stepped foot on a big boy football field. Butkus finalist this past year in 2020. So, very highly regarded amongst his peers and in the community. He's a guy who's, obviously he's played a ton of football in his collegiate career. An asset more so in pass defense than run defense. It looks like on tape, in a short time in a new environment, it was really impressive. He was able to show the ability to learn and understand new concepts. Because he stepped foot on LSU's campus, I believe, in like late spring, if I'm not mistaken, maybe over the summer. And during a COVID year where he wasn't able to be around the coaches, he wasn't able to be on the practice field, be around his teammates often. He basically stepped in and was a plug and play guy. And so I thought that was absurdly impressive. He showed his value predominantly playing in space this season, covering big slot receivers and tight ends, fluid in movement, smooth in his drops, while reading the quarterback, which is important. I think some of these guys that end up getting ranked high, if you watch what they do in pass coverage, they'll drop, but they're always looking around trying to see what's going on. This kid, pretty much every time he drops is these guys' instincts, his peripherals working for him. He's watching the quarterback. He's making moves based on what he sees. So he reads the quarterback. He makes plays very instinctively. Shows range and open field athletic ability. Proved himself valuable as a pass rusher. I think where he must improve at is in the run game. He's not a very physically imposing player like some of these other guys, or particularly explosive or twitched up like some of these other guys. But he's very efficient in his movements, and he tackles really well, especially in space. Again, a very important thing, being able to tackle in space. Essentially, you can't give up big plays. And we have way too many guys give up big plays for us in the back half this year in Chicago, just basically because their inability to tackle in space. It drives me absolutely freaking crazy. But again, he's not a guy that's going to play with a ton of physicality and a ton of nasty and malicious intent and all that kind of thing. But he will take a shot when given a chance. I think where he must improve on is his ability to defeat blocks. But he does put in the effort. He uses his hands. He shows the ability to understand how to do it. So I think it's a matter of a development of strength that's going to be imperative. Once he gets to the NFL level. He plays a sideline to sideline energy. However, kind of like Collins, doesn't quite possess the elite speed to be able to get to the edge on the perimeter consistently. He'll need time to develop at the next level, and during that time, he'll be 100% a valuable asset on special teams. However, he possesses the necessary traits from which to build off of. He's got a great floor, and as a guy with a ton of experience, he'll come in hitting the ground running, like he showed when he moved on to LSU from North Dakota State. Interesting kid, really interesting kid. I think he's a round 4 guy.
You agree with Alex Sims, who says this linebacker class is so deep it might be the deepest since 2018?
I said at the beginning, I think I have, let me run down my list here real quick. I think I have somewhere in the neighborhood of 20.
That's right. You said 20.
Draft grades. I got 21 draft grades on this class. So it's the interesting thing about this class is that it's light in numbers, but it's deep in draft grades. A lot of times you get a class that's heavy in numbers and a lot lighter than this on draft grades. At least that's the way it feels to me. But because I feel like with all the positions of need for us, the quarterback class super top heavy, but very valuable in the middle. The offensive tackle class absurdly deep. Inside linebackers, I think that in terms of guys of who I would feel comfortable bringing in, I think you can go probably 15, 16 deep there. Wide receivers, I have 43 draft grades on, and I think that list is going to grow here in the next couple of days. Cornerbacks is surprisingly, arguably the most deep class in terms of high level talent.
Right.
And then, the edge rushers that we talked about is very top heavy. But if we can go ahead and wrap up one of those guys in the top 4 rounds, we're going to get a dude that again is going to come in and compete right away. So it's really interesting dichotomy when you look at it from 30,000 feet.
Yeah, by the way, I want to take a look. I have not looked at any tape of William Bradley King, who Dane has in the Bears mock at the 6th round. But reading his profile on him, I thought he's definitely a guy I want to look at some tape on, and maybe we can talk about him in an upcoming show. By the way, this is what Dane says about Jabril Cox. Has holes in his games, primarily with his run fits. That makes it tough to love him, but he is easy to like with his smooth athleticism, spatial awareness, and football character. So
I feel like Dane and I have been spot on with all these guys in terms of the bottom line.
I totally agree with that. All right, let's move on now to number 10 on your top 10 list. This kid from West Virginia, Tony Fields II.
Yeah, Tony Fields II from West Virginia and also Arizona. Another one of these grad transfer guys. Really fun kid to watch. Pro day numbers: 6'2", 222, 9 on the hands, just under 31 on the arms, 76 on the wing. So again, another guy that's kind of undersized, right? A guy that still kind of concerns you with what he brings to the table from a stature standpoint, a physical stature standpoint. He ran 4.6 in the 40, 4.48 in the shuttle, and 7.1 on the cone. In terms of explosion numbers, 34 on the vert, 9.6 on the broad. Like a couple of these other guys, not eye-popping numbers by any stretch, but it's just what he does on the field, which gets me kind of amped up. He started all 46 games in his 4-year career, which is pretty special. He didn't miss a single game. Came in, stepped on the field as a true freshman, and played every single game, started every single game until he graduated from Arizona to West Virginia. Easily the most experienced guy in the group. There's things to love about Tony, and there's things that absolutely drive me freaking nuts. All right. But the things that I love about him is that he has an absolutely incredible motor. He plays with an active spirit and energy that's it's like his hair is on fire. He's like the Energizer Bunny. He's a Tasmanian devil. He's all over the place. He shows excellent burst and suddenness when he fires forward. He's kamikaze with his body. He has really light, hyper quick feet and a high level of reactionary and instinctive athleticism, which I think are pretty special for the kid. And I think which is why he's going to be able to win a lot of battles. If not with his physicality, he's going to be able to basically out-athlete guys. He's able to beat blocks, bending like an edge rusher, kind of like Chaz Surratt. Great in pursuit. In the passing game, he floats well in space. He's a solid zone player. In terms of his negatives, I think he's got a very poor ability to read at this point, even though as experienced as he is. And maybe it's just because he just wants to make the big play. Maybe it's his aggressive nature, or maybe he's being told to key on certain things, and especially in misdirection, he ends up being completely out of the play. So I think that a lot of that is a very coachable thing. It's not an instinctive thing. I think it's a coachable thing that can be fixed. He struggles some in the passing game, defending throwing lanes. He needs to learn how to disengage using his hands. Again, all things that are coachable, all things that can be worked on. Fortunately, the things that you love about him are the natural elements of his play. He would certainly be extremely valuable in special teams, if nothing else, because the kid, just his reckless nature in the way that he goes about taking on contact, making plays, getting the runner on the ground, knocking the shit out of somebody. If he's not ready to able to provide a starting role in defense, he's going to be an absolute, demon on special teams, which really drives up his value. I think that it's important to note that, when you bring in these guys, you're not looking for guys that just produce on, first, second, third, and fourth down, but you're looking for guys that can produce in two different sides of the ball. And so, having a guy that's, fully functional as a guy on special teams, I think is, incredibly valuable.
Well, everybody. Well, let me put Dane's thoughts on Tony Fields up first before you answer the $64,000 question, as we used to say many years ago, about why Davis isn't on your top 10. This is what Dane Brugler says about Fields. Can be too easily engulfed when he isn't a step ahead of the play, but he is an instinctive player with above average play speed to be a rangy run and hit weak side linebacker in the NFL. I think you guys are pretty much in agreement on Tony Fields. All right, so why? Let me pull up a comment here. First of all,
am I getting roasted right now for not having Davis on the list? Am I getting roasted?
Well,
I'm getting hammered right now.
Yes. By particularly a couple of people. Aaron from the Barfly Tailgate Show says, Tony Fields over Jamin? No.
Well, yeah.
Of course,
the resident
Aaron.
Kentucky fan.
Exactly. I was just going to say.
You would take Drake Jackson in the first round, this guy. Love you, AC. I fucking love you.
But you did say that you were going to explain why Davis is in your top 10. Tell us why.
Yeah, I think the hype on this guy is him being a day one and early day two guy is just way too much for me. It's way too rich for my blood. It's way too comfortable for where I want to be comfortable at with this kid. He is there's an interesting small group of guys once I get past Tony Fields, and really Tony Fields is a part of this. I had a hard time picking number 10, which is why I took so long to get this list to you. Because there's a group of 5 after group of 4 after Tony Fields, 5 if you include Tony Fields, that are all relatively the same type of player, with a lot of similar traits and attributes and play styles and physicality and energy and motor and all these things. And Jamin Davis has some of those. He's to me he's a guy that's all hype right now. He had this unbelievable pro day where I'll rattle the numbers for the guys I don't know. 6'3.5", 234. Length numbers, he's 9.5 in the hands, 33 in the arms, just under 80 in the wing. Great length numbers. And you can see that on tape. He's a solidly built, long dude. Can't deny that. Plus, right? You look at speed, obviously, killed it with a 4.47 and a 4.9. Fast on the track. Explosion numbers jumped 42 high and 11 broad, and those are elite as elite gets. Can't deny that. Massive plus. 21 reps on the bench. Apparently strong, naturally strong. Plus. 36 games over his career. Only 11 of those were starts. This past year was the first year as a starter. Incredible production over that 1 year as a starter. 102 tackles, 4 for loss, 1.5 sacks. The 4 for loss and 1.5 sacks isn't, special, but being able to have 102 tackles on a stat line, that'll open your eyes. Forced fumble recovery, 3 picks, quarterback hit, 2 PBUs, and a block kick. Again, 1 year starter, those kind of numbers, plus. He was really only kind of a contributor in 2019. He wasn't really kind of he wasn't a main cog in that defense. He was more of a role guy. So just talking about that background, his strengths right now are really his testing numbers and his media hype. And I think that's what's going to get him drafted so high, unless, these guys really kind of look at this without the Wildcat colored lenses. He's physically and athletically, he's got great traits on paper. But I don't see those showing up on game film. He doesn't play at a 4.5 and better speed. I don't see him playing explosive or sudden. after a couple games and, a clip of best plays, a lot of his stats and his big plays to me kind of come on account of others' mistakes. The fumble recovery versus Georgia, or the pick versus Tennessee, which were gifts, right place, right time kind of stuff. He's a guy that will either take time to mold and grow, or he'll only ever be a special teams guy. And that basically strictly because of the measurables, really. I think he shows poor instincts in reacting to plays. He overruns angles. He appears at times to avoid contact, which scares the hell out of me. It's way too often for me to be comfortable. He allows the ball carrier into him. He doesn't necessarily attack the guy as often as he should. He's not as physical in his play as I want him to, as I want him to be. I think he got, dominated by blockers from the film that I saw. Couldn't get off blocks. Doesn't typically drive anyone backward on contact either. Technically, he's raw in using his hands. He crosses over his feet in space. At times appears cumbersome, especially changing direction in the passing game. He looks stiff in his lower body at times. I don't have his mobility measurables, which is another thing that kind of freaks me out. Whether it was another guy that didn't get a chance to watch his pro day. So I don't know if he just didn't do them, or if we just don't have them reported, or if they weren't filmed, or whatever the case may be. But we don't have the mobility numbers. We don't have the short shuttle. We don't have the 3-cone. After watching a couple games, 2-3 games of this past season, and the season before, these are the things that measure the ability to change direction and all that, and be explosive in movement, and not lose momentum. I feel it was, if he didn't do them, I feel that it was strategic almost. And judging by the tape, they wouldn't be very good, and they would be kind of tells. Not that him not doing them isn't already a tell, but just a small red flag. Lots of questions with Jamin. Me personally, I could see stretching to take him maybe late day 2, early day 3 with the speed, the explosion measurables we do have. But I can also see that if he was coached to play the way that he is, with this sort of like read, react sort of style, not really attacking ball carriers, not attacking the play, whatever the case may be, maybe there's hope of developing it into being more of a ass-kicking type of player. But I just didn't see a lot of the qualities that I value in linebackers that I think, work in, the system that we have established here in Chicago. I think he's interesting in terms of all the stuff that he has on paper. But he's a big question mark for me. So I have him. I have him probably day 3, early-ish day 3, kind of like a round 5 guy, maybe round 6.
Interesting take. Very interesting take. We've seen it over and over again. Every draft, guys who the media have hyped up, all of a sudden they're not a day one pick, and sometimes they even fall to day 3. Let's see what Dane Brugler wrote about him in The Beast, his draft guide over at The Athletic. This, and I apologize for mispronouncing names. I'm just terrible at it. But it's not Jamin, it's Jamin, as properly said. He isn't a banger and needs to improve his take-on skills, but he trusts his eyes and plays fast to quickly respond to play development. He projects as a run and chase linebacker. Let me also add that he writes he needs to develop more of a counterattack versus blockers and clean up his tackling technique, but he casts a wide net with his length to make open field stops. So interesting take by both of you. That is your top 10 list. And again, tomorrow here on Draft on Tap at 8 p.m. Central, Neil returns and he's going to comment on Danny Shimon's top 10 list. And perhaps there'll be a debate about some of these players, just like we've had a debate with some of you folks in the chat room.
Am I still getting roasted about Jamin?
Let's see what Aaron's saying here. Aaron says, I honestly thought he was a 3rd round pick too, but I had to bring
you brought him up because you're a Kentucky fan.
That's right.
Danny's giving me hell about being an Notre Dame fan. AC wants to draft Jamin Davis in the 1st round over
here. And Alex says he respects the fact that you made up a lot of good and true points about Jamin. So I think you've quieted the throng in the chat room. Any final thoughts about the inside linebacker group before we take a break, and then we come back for our final segment to talk about something pretty serious that I'd love everyone to stick around for. Any final thoughts on this linebacker group?
Yeah, I said I have what did I say I have, like 21 draft grades on guys. I think the late rounds are interesting for teams that use old school, bang around linebackers, old school mics, pigeonholed mics, I call them, because you got guys like Monty Rice from Georgia, right? Patty Fisher in Northwestern, Errol Thompson from Mississippi State, KJ Britt from Auburn, Tuff Borland from Ohio State. Those are guys that are about as old school gets, and about as hard nosed and physical and Mike Singletary, Brian Urlacher type dudes as it gets. For teams that, and I know like we don't use these type of guys here in Chicago, but I think a lot of these guys that will appear higher on other draft boards of other mocks that you'll see, I have these guys lower specifically for the fit, but some of these guys are really interesting in a sense that you have guys that have played a lot of football, have a lot of experience, a lot of leadership, captains, 40+ starts, big size, bangers, and especially a guy like KJ Britt, who his peers, thought was the best linebacker down in Mobile, for Senior Bowl. I think that's really interesting, looking forward, just looking at it, from 30,000 feet. I talk about that cluster of guys past Tony Fields I thought were really interesting. In terms of guys that really excite me, that I have a lot of fun watching, that I can't project anywhere in Chicago other than special teams, Grant Stewart from Houston. You talk about Tasmanian devil type dudes, man. This kid is hilarious. That big ass hair flying around the field, just making plays. He's just way too small. He's going to get swallowed up way too easily. Yeah. For where we would be using him, but he's a kid. If you guys haven't watched this kid and just want to go ahead and watch a few clips, put on a couple game films of Grant Stewart, watch Houston's defense. It's going to be a lot of fun. But overall, I think it's like I said, it's a really good class, probably from for really the Bears from the 5th round forward. And then after that, you start getting into, Mikes and guys that can't move as well. And basically guys that are going to be as good or worse than Danny Trevathan is. And obviously we're looking to, improve the room. So I think if you're going to take a guy 5th round and up is where we got to focus on.
There you go. What did you mention Patty Fisher, the Northwestern linebacker, in your comments there?
Patty Fisher.
Yeah. Well, and again, what are your thoughts on him?
Patty Fisher,
I got to tell you, every time I do a mock draft, I get down to the final rounds and there he is. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I saw him play against Purdue. Danny and I were at that game. He played well. This was obviously in his junior season. I kind of like him, but he could be an undrafted free agent, so maybe target him there. I don't know if he's worthy of a draft pick. What do you think about his play?
I have him probably a little bit higher than others do because I value things like football intelligence and toughness and work ethic and character and all those types of things that really are what the Northwestern program's about. So I have him a little bit higher in that sense, just in my own personal taste. But I see him going 6th. I see him going 7th. I see him being a preferred undrafted free agent. My notes on him, just first talk about the pro day numbers: 6'3 1/4, 240, 9 5/8 hands, 33 and an 1/8 arms, 79 and 5/8 wings. So I mean, and you can see it on tape. This kid's just long, right? Ran a 4.91 40, 4.47 on the shuttle. The cone was at 7 flat. The explosion numbers, he has a 31.5 vert, 9.2 broad, and then 20 reps on the bench. So I mean, with him, size and length checks the box. Plays with sound feet, hand, and tackling fundamentals. Possesses high football intelligence and competitiveness. Effort, strength, toughness. That's what he is. He's an effort, strength, and toughness guy. He's able to handle offensive linemen, avoid and shed blocks with his arms and his strength and everything else. But just athletically, he's limited. He's quick enough with his feet to be able to change direction with adequate fluidity in the hips, but he struggles with reactionary athleticism and lacks range to the sideline. Box player all the way. He'll put himself in the right place with his ability to read the play. Like I said, his football intelligence is extremely high, but he's going to struggle in the passing game at the next level just due to those limitations of being able to move in space and stay with, bigger, faster, more athletic dudes. The interesting notes on him is that he is the first 3-time captain in Northwestern football history, which, that's that's a wow thing.
Yeah, for
You know, typical Fitz guy all the way though. Impeccable character, leadership, work ethic, has all the intangible things that you love. I could see him going as high as 6. I think most people have him probably 7th or you know, free agent, you know, type kid. So I think about him.
This is what Dane says about Patty Fisher. He's average athletically, which severely lowers his margin for error, but he competes with NFL level toughness, passion, and instincts as a run and zone defender. He's got him projected as a 7th round pick. And then we had a question from our man, Alex. He says, Neil, do you have a draft grade for Anthony Hines? Because I don't know why he opted out this year to enter the draft. And so have you looked at any of that Hines tape, and what do you got to say about him? I'm going to find out what Dane has. Actually, I have it here. Dane says that Hines's draft grades will vary around the league as evaluators balance his inexperience, inconsistency, and his speed upside. He projects as a special teamer with the skills to potentially be more. What do you got on him?
I don't have too much on him, to be honest with you. I didn't go deep into, you know, his film. I watched Texas A&M, you know, this past year for Buddy Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously with Hines not playing, I didn't get a chance to really look at, you know, Anthony Hines film.
And
but
Dane had, as a 7th rounder, undrafted free agent caliber kind of player.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, I think. You know, he's a kid that I know a lot about, you know, his history, was really involved in his recruiting process at Mississippi State. You know, I don't want to say that he's been overrated for life or anything like that, you know, because he's not a bad player whatsoever. I think that the problem is that this kid's been overhyped for life. You know, he was overhyped as a 5-star player in high school. He was overhyped as a high draft pick, or as a, you know, a high level SEC kid in college. And, you know, I think a lot of people were overhyping him as a higher draft pick than he is. I mean, he's got size and he's got athletic ability, and he's got, you know, I think he has some of these attributes that I like in terms of, you know, how he plays the game, his motor and everything else. You know, you know me really well as far as guys that opt out that have no business opting out, and that's an immediate turnoff. So I didn't really go into it. I suppose you know, he's one of those guys that I do have on my list though, that I will go ahead and turn on a couple games on before we get to draft week, just so I have at least something intelligent to say about him. Right.
Yeah. Well, you know, this has been a very challenging year for draft evaluators, prospect evaluators, because of the pandemic. No combine, very little access to players, if at all. So it's just been a hellacious year. And so the work that you and Danny have done for Draft on Tap and the Barroom Network has just been superlative to gather as much information. And I know you work the phones and talk to people besides just watching the tape. So really appreciate that hard work. Now, I want to let people know that we're going to come back for one more segment. It's going to be a shorter segment. We have something important to talk about. So we're going to go to this commercial break and we'll be right back.
Guys, it's Peggy Kaczynski. I retired early from my 20-something career as a sportscaster, covering the Bulls, the Bears, the Blackhawks, the Cubs, the White Sox, and really every other college and high school team in Chicago. So what do you do after that? Well, you start a podcast. That's what I did with my teenage son, Jason. And the result is The Sportscaster and Her Son. Yes, I'm the baby boomer, a mom. We don't get along. We don't have a lot in common, but we both share a love for sports. And we always have great sports conversation. Even better, our guests in the interviews. So come check us out. We're on Podbean and the Barroom Network, or really wherever you get your audio. The Sportscaster and Her Son podcast. See you there.
look, I don't mean any disrespect. He just didn't play that well, not for a guy of his caliber.
If they don't run the ball here, I'm going to vomit. I swear to God.
I don't really have any recollection of that at all, but I guess perhaps I blacked it all out.
You know, they won, but I'm going to be miserable all week because they stunk. That's right. We are going to be back on Monday night. Danny Aguirre and myself, we're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about movies. Sometimes we talk about politics. Dan Aguirre always talks about politics. But we mostly talk about football. And so we'll be back Monday after a week off. Actually, I went to get my COVID vaccination shot, and I was concerned because I heard all these stories that, you know, the second shot usually gives you all these after effects and so forth. So I told Dan, you know what, I'm going to play it safe. Let's not do a show. I was like totally cool, man. I had no issues whatsoever. The first shot, I did the Pfizer one, the 2 shots. The first one, I had the sore shoulder and I felt a little off and stuff. But the second one, man, I was fine. So we could have done a show last Monday, but I actually enjoyed the time off to be with the family and stuff. So
yeah, it's important.
Absolutely. And that's where Danny Shimon is right now. He's celebrating his son's birthday, his 8th birthday. So Danny, we will see you tomorrow on another special edition of Draft on Tap. And we've got something special to talk about tonight. This is something that Neil made me aware of. And I think, you know, this is a very sensitive topic to talk about. I understand multiple points of view here, but I want to put up on the screen a tweet by Stephen Ruiz, who works for the USA Today. He wrote, Jim Nagy says that he doesn't think racial bias affects how black quarterbacks prospects are evaluated by the NFL. We are past that, he says. Because he is a gatekeeper of sorts for NFL prospects, that ignorance is obviously an issue. And he goes on to write an opinion piece at USA Today for the Win. And Jim Nagy is a friend of the Barroom. I've met him every time I've headed down to the Senior Bowl. Neil has a relationship with Jim as well. And so it was disturbing to read a football commentator, a draft analyst for a major publication like USA Today, or it's their digital arm, go after Jim Nagy. And I've got some thoughts that I want to share, but I definitely want to give the floor first to Neil, who has some really strong opinions about how Stephen Ruiz went after Jim Nagy here. And so it's all yours, brother.
Yeah, you know, that really got me fired up. And you covered the whole relationship aspect of it that we have with Jim, knowing how he goes about his business. And let's not construe what scouting is. You know, I understand that we talk about a game, but it's a business and it's a profession, and it is, it is based off of objectivity. I think it's 100% Bush League, the way that this dude, who I called, something called Stephen Ruiz, because he acted as though he was a fucking troll bot, the way that he went about, putting this on there. But it's absolutely Bush League. And, although we both obviously grew up in the days before there was, a big online, presence, back when we actually used to, read newspapers and stuff where, opinion pieces, those were in sections of the newspapers that were more or less disregarded. I grew up in, South Bend, Indiana, where David Haw was the sports guy for the South Bend Tribune. And he did an awesome job as a real journalist, a big J journalist, not like the non-existent J that, Stephen Ruiz showed this past week. I would normally say is a small J journalist, but he showed non-existent J this past week. It really pissed me off. But, you know, the point being is that, you know, opinion pieces are supposed to be highly disregarded as just opinion pieces based off of nothing but subjectivity.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It's not objective stuff that's being spewed around about Jim Nagy right now. It's highly subjective. And, you know, when I was going through it's funny because I was thinking about this very thing, like going back in my memory and thinking about, you know, the opinion section, the South Bend Tribune and everything else. And when I was a little kid, I was like to a nerd obsession, you know, into sports. Like I had a newspaper scrapbook, and it had everything from, you know, Sean Wooden breaking up Charlie Ward's pass in the end zone in the game of the century to Rick Meyer's, you know, press conference saying he was returning, to Michael Jordan, you know, winning, you know, title number 2, to, you know, that you know, shot against the Lakers and Olympic stuff, Dan Jansen and Bonnie Blair and you know, Chris Chelios and, you know, everything else in between, right? Looked through the paper on a daily basis, and, you know, David Hawes' name was always came up, and I read his articles because specifically I am concerned about the who, the what, the why, the where, and the how, and that is the meat and potatoes of journalism. That's where it starts, and that's where it finishes, and everything else in between is noise, and it's very black and white. You know, there's no gray area about objectivity, no gray area about facts. It's black and white, and you know, David Hall was really good at what he did. Now he's at the Score, right? He's got Molly and Howe in the mornings. You know, as I wake up, I'll tune in that show sometime. They do a good job. Mm-hmm. But I think, you know, it's important that, and I've talked with you about it on the show before, Aldo. It's important that we, as people that have voices, we're not reckless with our voices. We're not insensitive with our voices, and we're also very imperative about the type of things that we say. And, you know, I think the first time I brought that up is when we were talking about this quarterback situation, and we knew how the fan base would just completely, you know, go off the rails if, you know, this whole thing about around Russell Wilson went the wrong way. And I think, you know, one of the first things that I said about that is that I think we just need to pump the brakes a little bit and temper our expectations. And us as show hosts, I think we need to be the leaders on that, so that, you know, if we're able to bring some logical thought and some reasoning and you know, rationale to the conversation about why this would work, why it won't work, why it's good, why it's bad, you know, present multiple sides of arguments, and not just be, you know, emotionally in your face or illogically, you know, motivated or whatever the case may be, mm-hmm. then I think we're leading the audience in the correct direction, right? In terms of what Stephen put out about, you know, Jim Nagy is number one, I've already said it's Bush League. Number two, you know, Jim Nagy probably accepted this you know, interview in good faith, thinking that, you know, this guy probably follows my work. He knows that, you know, I am, you know, really good at what I do, and that what goes into the evaluation, scoring of athletes, mm-hmm. or evaluation of athletes is solely based on what they do on the football field. And then also, as a side note, what they do off the field as well. Because I think that, you know, we talked about a couple guys, you know, earlier today, in Jeffrey Simmons and Michael Parsons, that had, you know, off the field issues that have since been, you know, well, seemingly in Michael Parsons' case have since been, you know, established as probably non-issues. But, you know, I'm also not within the four walls of Penn State's football program to know the ins and outs, the who, the why, the what, the where, and the how of Micah Parsons' situation. And neither is Stephen Ruiz. I can probably bet that he's never been within the four walls of a NFL franchise, a college football program, a scouting evaluation department, and probably has zero clue what goes into a scouting and evaluation process. I think what it comes down to, we do have some poor journalists out there spewing garbage out of their mouths on a daily basis, uninformed, instigating, clueless garbage. I deal in the business of objectivity. Jim Nagy deals in the business of objectivity. Any self-respecting scout deals in the business of objectivity. It's a very prideful business in terms of not mistaking things let's not mistake scouting for anything but a very, very prideful business. And I say that to mean that part of the business is competition. It's, it's wanting to win, and going hand in hand with that is finding the best players, having the absolute most accurate evaluation you could possibly have. As an area scout, it's, you talk about the process of going from, starting a class to finishing a class. And that really starts around this time now. During pro days, these scouts are getting the Rising Senior Day information, which really for us at Mississippi State was just all about, length and physical measurables. It was the height, the weight, the hand, the width, the arm. It was the very simple stuff to really just get the ball rolling. Mm-hmm. And then on, pro day, the scouts that wanted to stick around and talk to me about this upcoming class would stick around and talk to me. And I give them basically the 2-sentence bottom line on, pretty much what the kid's about, from a player standpoint, a personal standpoint, a character standpoint, an intelligence standpoint, all the things that, you would say during a bottom line to basically describe who and what a player is. It goes, into the fall where, these guys are on campus and they are, evaluating really the full gamut of the background during the month of August. During the season, they're coming back, circling around, watching practice, seeing guys at games, watching the film. January is all about the All-Star games. February is all about meetings. The month of March is all about pro days. The month of April, as we sit right now, is just nothing but draft meetings where these guys sit in rooms for 12 hours a day and they do nothing but talk about the background and watch the film and talk about the measurables and evaluate the film and break down the traits and everything else and arrange their draft boards. Scouts don't have time for any personal biases that may or may not exist. All right. Scouts, the pressure of getting it right means everything. All right. They're not in the business of trying to be right. They're in the business of getting it right. It's a prideful business. It's a get it right business. Getting it right translates to wins. And it also translates to the personal resume as well. As an area scout, I'm the type of guy that is not going to let shit that doesn't matter get in the way of a rock solid eval. Because number one, what that does is affect your reputation. And I want to be at a point where everything that comes out of my mouth is solid fucking gold. All right. Not to turn this into an R-rated segment, but everything out of my mouth when it comes to an evaluation, I talk all the time about trusting my evaluation, writing down what I see and being completely logical and objective, and everything out of my mouth being solid gold, because down the line, I don't want the guy that I may or may not have a bias against end up being an all-star, but I put him as just a career backup because I have a bias. That's not what we do. That's not what we're about. And it is completely fucking insulting that this kid will go on social media like that and slander and drag Jim Nagy, a guy who's really good at what he does. Dragging his name through the mud is completely disrespectful. It's unacceptable. And I'm not fucking having it. Just so you know, Aldo.
Well, I appreciate your passion on the topic. I had a very similar visceral reaction to the opinion piece that Stephen Ruiz wrote because of what I know about Jim Nagy. And as I read that piece, I said to myself, I understand that this is an opinion piece. But I don't think that it is fact-based. I think that he's kind of cherry-picked some of the tweets that Jim Nagy has made, and basically that's what this is all about. This is about a exchange that Jim had with someone on Twitter, Quincy Avery, and Quincy wrote, I'm happy for Mac, but Quincy Avery was saying that the drop by Justin Fields has been kind of alarming, and yet the rise by Mac Jones has been, maybe it's because he's related to a white guy. And I'm paraphrasing here, and I apologize to Quincy Avery if I got that wrong. Jim responded by saying he just doesn't see it the same, can only speak to personal experience in draft rooms and race, never played a role in quarterback evaluations. In that particular line, Stephen really zeroed in on that. Race never played a role in quarterback evaluations. Well, Stephen Ruiz, he's speaking from his personal evaluation, not everybody's. And so Jim goes on in his tweet to say, seen plenty of white quarterbacks get killed for poor football IQ, work ethic, personal character, etc. Seems like people outside the NFL are the ones who infuse race into it. And then Stephen really zeroed in on that comment too. I can understand why Stephen and other people are sensitive to that. There is a long history of sports evaluators, general managers, and so forth making observations that are race-based. Long time history. I'm old enough to remember when the Los Angeles Dodgers general manager, I forgot his name, but he was on Nightline, the ABC news program at 10:30, and he said that there weren't a lot of baseball managers who were black because they didn't have the necessities. Something crazy, you know. It was clearly a racially insensitive or racist statement, and that has happened. And I understand about implicit bias. I have been guilty of it myself. I'm Puerto Rican. I'm light-skinned, so I get to witness a lot of things that other Hispanics don't witness because people don't know that I'm Hispanic or so forth. And so people say things that they probably wouldn't have said if they knew that I was Hispanic. So I get implicit bias. I've been guilty of it myself. As I said, I remember I once received an award as one of the top 100 producers in corporate television. And I flew to San Francisco to accept my award. And there was the 100 producers were in a greeting line, and there were 3 people in the line. There was a man, a woman, and another man. And when I got to the line, there was an African-American man there. And for some reason, I just didn't think that he was the president of the association. And so I kind of bypassed him and went to the white male and shaked his hand and so forth. And then when I sat down to get my award, who was it that presented the award to me? The president of the association, an African-American male. So I was guilty of implicit bias. I let that skin color of that person dictate what I was thinking about who was in charge, who was the lead person, so forth. So I admit that, and I think that happens in draft rooms across the country to some extent or another. Jim Nagy says in his opinion, in his history, his personal history, it has never been an issue. And so we have to take him at his word. And if you know Jim Nagy and what he has done for athletes of color, to make that accusation in an opinion piece is wrong. It is definitely wrong. And I understand, again, I understand the sensitivity to that type of thinking about implicit bias, but you can't affix that to an individual, particularly if you haven't talked to the person and you're just judging it from social media tweets. That's just ridiculous. This is social media where you're regulated to 140 something characters, and nobody really has the opportunity to express themselves. Stephen Ruiz should have picked up the phone and called Jim Nagy and said, listen, I have a problem with these tweets that you exchange. But Stephen Ruiz didn't do that. And Stephen Ruiz apparently doesn't like to respond or seek information. I've called him a number of times to be a guest on this show, to talk about prospects and so forth. He didn't have the decency to return my calls. Maybe he never saw them. Maybe he never saw my emails. But that sort of gives me a clue as to the type of character that he likes to espouse his point of view without potentially seeking out the opinions of others and being courteous towards others and responding to calls. So I did a little research about Steven Ruiz because in that opinion column, he went on to chastise Jim Nagy for some of his opinions and his player evaluations, and saying, he's had this opinion about this guy and this opinion about this guy. Should he really be in charge of the Senior Bowl? Well, here's Steven Ruiz's take on Sam Darnold when he was taken by the Jets. Gave him a grade A. The Jets gave up too much to move up to the number 3 pick, but that won't matter in a couple of years when Darnold develops into one of the league's best quarterbacks. In that same draft, he gave a grade F to Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills, 7th pick of the first round. The Bills gave up 2 second-round picks for the right draft. For the right draft, the quarterback, he even wrote that incorrectly, who is nothing more than a strong arm. Allen is inaccurate, struggles to read defenses, is uncomfortable from the pocket. I mean, can anybody be more wrong? Steven Ruiz? You should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed of yourself. And if you want to come onto this show and have a civil discussion with Neil and myself and Danny, we can do that. But based on what I've seen from your columns and your social media attacks on Jim Nagy, you're going to have a rough go at it if you enter into the barroom to talk to us about this topic. That's all I got to say. I'm really pissed.
Although slander and libel are still things. I know that, it feels like people can just go ahead and say whatever the hell they want anymore, but the consequences still exist to be hammered based on the things that you say about people. And I don't understand how the hell we got here, really, honestly, with the way that all social media is working right now. But it's despicable about the way that people talk about people. And people, the civil discourse that people have, it's despicable, man.
There is a history of racism in this country, but in order for some people to point it out, they affix allegations and thoughts about certain people that are just totally incorrect. Mm-hmm. We need to whitewash, excuse the expression if someone takes offense to that, but we need to erase our thinking on certain issues when we're making judgments about other people. And I'm not saying forget about racism. Absolutely not. We need to learn more about it in our schools, in our conversations, so that we have a really firm understanding about what's happened in this country, which a lot of people refer to as the original sin. I get that. I totally understand it and I support it. But when people start making unfounded accusations against others, like Steven Ruiz did to Mr. Jim Nagy, a guy who has done so much for the Mobile, Alabama community. He has championed Jalen Hurts when Danny and I and you were down there, Neil, for when Jalen Hurts was the Senior Bowl quarterback. He put him up on a stage, gave him a special award because he was coming back to Alabama, really championed them. And Steven Ruiz in that column recites some obscure quarterback who is now a third stringer or trying to find a job and so forth, and that Jim Nagy didn't invite him to be at the Senior Bowl and instead invited a guy like Shea Patterson. Okay, anybody that's in the business of evaluating quarterbacks, we all make bad calls. We all make questionable calls. We all make calls that people are going to disagree with. But to try to include that in your arsenal about these allegations about Jim Nagy, all I got to say is grade F. Mm-hmm. Fuck off. All right, brother. Any final thoughts before we move on and wrap this one up and meet here again at 8 p.m. Central for our next session with Danny Shimon?
Yeah, man. I mean, that was a great show. That last segment, some powerful stuff. I mean, it always is, and it's always a touchy subject to a lot of people. And you know, I think I think it's always important to note that there are things that exist that are wrong, and that doesn't mean that they exist everywhere. It's equally as wrong to infuse things into situations where it doesn't,
Hmm.
and that should be equally as criminal, in my opinion. I don't know if you feel the same way, but
I totally feel the same way. And I just wish
yeah,
we would have more dialogue. And I wish Stephen Ruiz would have picked up the phone and said to Jim Nagy, hey, this is what I'm thinking here. Care to comment on it before I start writing this opinion piece? I'd love your thoughts on it. Let's talk about it, as
right.
opposed to doing a hit job on Jim Nagy, who, based on my experiences with him and based on everything that I've learned from him from other people, is a pillar of the community down in Alabama, and is a stand-up guy, and he just didn't deserve that attack. Just didn't.
100%. But
Uh,
hey, on the end of positive things, though,
Yes.
let's end this show on a positive note.
I like that idea.
Let's do that. So I love propping up local businesses. We all know that.
Mhm.
Me and Aubrey had an awesome New Haven style pizza tonight. In over here in Logan Square, off of California, this place called Boiler Room. We do New Haven style pies. We had this thing called the Big Dill, and it was bacon, mozzarella, Parmesan, pickles, perfectly crisp crust. I mean, it was one of the most like delicious slices of pie I ever had in my life. So hey, just propping up local businesses, support small business, shop local, all that type of stuff. Go check that place out. It's right by the L stop off California here in Logan Square, next neighborhood over from me, where Aldo grew up. And give him a shot, man. Delicious.
I love the fact that you are living in the area where I grew up. I mean, and I can't wait to get together with you and Aubrey so I can share with you some of the stories about growing up in that neighborhood and seeing how that neighborhood has changed over generations and so forth. And then having you guys give me a tour of the new Logan Square, Wicker Park, Humble Park, all Bucktown. Yeah, I've lived in all of those neighborhoods. Went from apartment to apartment to apartment before finally settling down at 1654 North Tolman in the Humble Park neighborhood, and lived there for about 10 years. But yeah, I've lived all over Chicago, so it's really cool that you and Aubrey are experiencing these places and that you share it on social media. So make sure you follow Neil on social media. Not only are you going to get some great information about Chicago sports and the NFL draft, but you're also going to get his take on some local eateries with recommendations as to where to drink, where to eat, and where just to have a good time. And those of you listening on the audio portion of this podcast, Neil, why don't you tell them how people can follow you on social media?
Yeah, well, at Neil Stopchinski. It's really hard to spell my last name, but just put NIELSTOP in the bar and it'll pop up. It's the only name of its kind that's out there, man. Funny thing about my first name, it's extremely unique for a reason. When I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and the birth certificate came back to my mom and pops actually misspelled, and they decided to keep it because it was unique. And so it's been that way ever since. I've had grade school teachers try to tell me that I'm spelling my name wrong, and I've had to have a note sent from my parents to the school to tell them to basically F off.
That's hilarious.
Growing up, it was like hell trying to spell the last name, and so I mean, like my middle name is really the only thing that's actually even remotely normal. So it's at NIELSTOP, and then the rest ought to fill itself out. Funny anecdote, when I was living down south in Mississippi, no one down there has a last name like that. It's so damn unique that everybody looks at my ID, to look at me, my ID back to me, has that kind of look as if I have like a dick growing out of my forehead or something. Like, what is that? Kind of thing. So it's funny. It's hellacious to spell, but it's fun to say, and
it really
unique.
is. I love saying it. I have to spell your name so many times, like on tweets and in our promotional materials and stuff, that I think I can now spell it totally out of memory without having to copy and paste on documents, which is what I did for the first couple of months of our relationship, just because I didn't want to screw it up, because I've known to screw up the pronunciation and the spelling on names. I'm notorious at it, but you definitely have a cool name. It's one that I'll never forget. When I was in grade school, there was a kid in class. He was from Serbia, I want to say, and his name was Steven Petronjevic.
Yes.
And isn't that a great name? It's musical. And I would go home, walk home, and I would just sing it to myself. Steven Petronjevic. It was such a cool name. Now, my name, on the other hand, Aldo Gandia, never have I thought that had a good ring to it. It was just, I can't believe my mom, she went to go see a war movie in 1958, the year I was born, and it starred Robert Ryan and an actor named Aldo Ray. She chose Aldo Ray to give me that name. My name is Aldo Ray Gandia, and I could have been Robert Ryan Gandia, but she chose Aldo.
Which has been even more mundane.
Yeah, it's true.
But hey, at least yours is phonetically correct. Mine just looks like crunch. I mean, it's just, I don't even spell for people anymore. We show up at church on Sunday. They asked me for my name. I just said STOP consonants. Just look for the consonants.
That would be a great Wheel of Fortune clue, is to try to figure that one out. We need to do that. I mean, you had a good idea a few shows ago about doing a bracket on snacks, and we never got around to doing that. But we got to table that for the next year when we get the tournament, and then also do a Wheel of Fortune with show host names.
Snack draft.
Oh,
boom.
I love the way you think, brother.
Boom.
I love the way you think, man. Great show, and I really, really appreciate the job you did to fly solo tonight and handle the draft evals of these top 10 linebackers. It's not like I helped. I was just like nodding, saying, oh, but I learned a hell of a lot today, and great job with the interview with Dane Brugler. Remember, you can follow Dane on Twitter at DPBRUGLER, and he's over at The Athletic, and it's I forgot what the subscription cost is now, but it's worth every penny. He's a great guy, and hopefully we can get him back sometime soon. I know Danny must be really, really sad that he wasn't a part of this, but at the same time,
he's going to have his whole solo act tomorrow. It's going to be okay.
That's right. And Christian Shimon, happy 8th birthday. I hope you're having a great time and you got some cool presents. And that's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow, 8 p.m. Central. It'll be Neil, Danny, and myself. Join us then, okay? Take care.